Chapter 241, Truth. Stay calm. Facing his companion's inquisition, Lin Zidong did not become angry, merely asking them levelly to settle down. Indeed, we are all from Lilting, all friends. Let's discuss things civilly. Mu Ying, don't be impatient. Let's hear Lin Zidong's explanation. A young man seated beside Lin Zidong advised the livid Mu Ying with soothing tones while throwing a look at Lin Zidong at the same time, urging him to start explaining things quickly. Honestly, if Regiment Commander Kiao were not in closed-door meditation, I would have suggested directly to let Regiment Commander Kiao go forth personally to bring those people under control. Opening his mouth, Lin Zidong did not explain, instead stating his opinion. Why did you have to be so impatient? Couldn't we do this gradually in a more subtle manner? Do you know that these actions of yours will smear the good name of Lilting? Mu Ying once more leapt to his feet upon hearing Lin Zidong's words, practically spitting in rage as he almost shoved a finger right onto Lin Zidong's nose. Lin Zidong pushed the other's finger aside with one hand, turned to look at the others present, and said, "Do you all also think the same way?" The young man who had initially been playing mediator instantly smiled dryly and said, "Zidong, your actions over these past few days have really gone a little overboard." Before he went into closed-door meditation, the regiment commander had said that any action representing Lilting as a whole needed to be discussed and agreed upon by all of us first before execution. You skipped talking to us, directly going ahead to provoke the other side so openly. He cast a glance at the others, then added, "We just feel extremely uninformed." The corner of Lin Zidong's lips carried a hint of a sneer. He looked towards the others, their gazes held unconcealed censure. He sniffed coldly and said, "It's not that I didn't want to tell you all, but I was afraid that if I told you all, this secret would get out. At that time, the loss for Lilting would be considerable." "You don't trust us?" Mu Ying leapt up once again. "Yes, I do not trust you all," replied Lin Zidong unreservedly. "You." Lin Zidong's words made the faces of everyone there change. They felt that these words were a huge insult directed at them. Seeing the situation turning sour, the mediating young man quickly said, "Zidong, how can you say things like that? Being friends for so many years, don't you have even this bit of trust in us?" Hearing this, Lin Zidong's expression gentled slightly. "It's not that I don't trust you all, I just don't trust the people by your sides. The more people who know, the easier it would be for this secret to get out. And this matter concerns whether we, Lilting, will finally be able to conquer and unite the factions in the military academy in the future." "What do you mean?" Lin Zidong's words caused everyone's expressions to shift. "You all must use your spiritual power to make a vow that the secret ends here with you all, otherwise I will not tell you." On this matter, Lin Zidong was surprisingly insistent and forceful. This also made the group exceptionally angry, almost flicking their sleeves to storm away. The mediating young man once again spoke up to ease the tension. "Zidong, is this really necessary? Making a vow with spiritual power is no small thing. The secret I'm about to say has great importance for Lilting. I believe that when the regiment commander finds out, he will also approve of the way I've handled things," answered Lin Zidong calmly. Mu Ying was the first to jump out. "If I have to make a vow, then I'll make a vow. But, Lin Zidong, if the secret you tell is less than dog shit, I will definitely report this to the regiment commander and get you kicked out of Lilting." Lin Zidong said haughtily, "If you all think this secret is not worth your spiritual power vows, you don't have to report to the regiment commander. I will ask to leave on my own." "Fine, Lin Zidong, you must follow through with your words." That said, Mu Ying was the first one to make a spiritual power vow. The others, seeing that Mu Ying had already done so, could only follow suit helplessly. Seeing that everyone present had made a vow, only then did Lin Zidong bring out a document from beside him. He then passed it to the mediator youth who was sitting closest to him. The youth opened it, and his expression changed as he read its contents. He forcefully suppressed the urge to ask questions, merely passing the document to the next in line. A similar expression appeared on the next person's face as well, and very quickly, The document had been passed through everyone's hands to finally return to Lin Zidong. Lin Zidong threw the document to one side, where an energy converter was already prepared. The converter deconstructed the file, turning it into a material energy, and saving it into an energy block. Now you've all seen it. This is why I did not notify you all, choosing to provoke the other side directly, said Lin Zidong coldly. How can this be? Mu Ying's face was a picture of disbelief. 1 or 2 is still believable, but for an entire ship's new cadets to be this way, this is too outlandish. In the face of Mu Ying's skepticism, Lin Zidong's face darkened. Do you all not trust my hacking skills? One of the group could not help but say awkwardly, Zidong, you're the hacker with the best grades in this school. We all trust in your abilities. It's just that the contents inside are just too outlandish, so we can't help but be a little suspicious. Could they have cheated? Another in the group glanced at Lin Zidong and then said slowly, or perhaps the information Zidong obtained is false. At the heart of it, they still did not believe in the appearance of these results. His companion's distrust made Lin Zidong's expression turn stormy. He held back the rage in his heart as he sneered. This information was obtained by me from the Academy's mainframe's most secure S-tier. If even the S-tier needs to contain such a fake document, I really don't know where else real documents should be stored. Should they be stored on the Federation's mainframe's S-tier instead? As for cheating, do you all really believe in that reason yourselves? Asked Lin Zidong with a mocking tone. The ones who test cadets are all hardened veteran soldiers who have been baptized in the flames of fire. Getting them to help you cheat? I don't know what price one could use to move them. Let me put this another way. Even if they cheated, would they make it so obvious? All the students on the entire ship being so outstanding, not a single one who failed? Lin Zidong's words made the others all cool down instantly. Indeed, a fake document would never be placed in the S-tier of the Military Academy's mainframe. Since Lin Zidong had said S-tier, then it definitely could not be wrong. After all, every year, the information Lin Zidong had mined from the S-tier on the new cadets had always been extremely accurate. It was impossible that he would have obtained false data from the wrong direction this time. Besides, if this was truly a case of cheating, the method was really too idiotic. These abnormal results would certainly attract the attention of the school administration, and prompt inquiries and investigations to prove its validity. No one would dare to be so blatant and daring in doing such an idiotic thing. I believe, not much longer after this, the hackers of the other factions should also be getting this data. At that time, there won't be any hope for us to monopolize this group of people. Lin Zidong swept his gaze around their circle before continuing to say, you all are clear on Regiment Commander Kiao's standards of recruitment. He only accepts new cadets whose assessment results are pass and above. Especially for those who did well, he would not hesitate to employ measures to obtain them. We cannot allow Regiment Commander Kiao miss out on these excellent talents while he is in closed-door meditation. Lin Zidong's little speech made everyone's expressions turn grim. They all knew Kiao Ting's methods. If he knew the assessment results of these new cadets, he would definitely use all sorts of means to pull them into his fold. However, since they are so exceptional, they probably won't be so easy to subdue. Everyone loved excellent talents, but these people would often be extremely proud and self-assured, unwilling to easily submit to another. That's why I set up this stage. Even if we're a bit arrogant, we need to let the other side accept our challenge and then follow up with a bet. When they lose, they'll have to collectively join us. Lin Zidong had already thought things through. What if they are afraid and don't dare to accept our challenge? After all, Lting was the #1 faction in the school. These new cadets may find their legs trembling from fear at the mere mention of Lting's name. That would be even better. We can just push for them to join us if they don't even dare to fight us. We can then promise to pardon all past transgressions against us. But if they dare to join any other factions, we'll beat them up every single time we see them. In the mecha world, we will block off all avenues of their growth. If we can't use them, then we will crush them completely, said Lin Zidong with a cold smile. He had already considered both possible reactions from the other side. He would not let them escape his grasp. He would make sure to wrap this up well before the regiment commander emerged from his training. If it's a battle with the new cadets, the school rules only allow physical skills combat, and those students are from Doha, which prioritizes physical skills the most. I fear that we won't be able to have much of an advantage. No matter how strong they are in combat, they are still just first-year cadets, young fledglings freshly out from the scout academies, while we're already fourth-year or fifth-year senior cadets. Mecha combat has not only improved our mecha skills, it has also spurred on the development of our physical skills. Those extra years of combat experience is enough for us to push them around, said Lin Zidong with a cold smirk. Even those among us with the weakest physical skills would have been able to make up for the lack of talent in 3 years' time. You think they have a chance? Well, that's true. The group nodded all around. They may have put their focus on mecha combat for the past few years, but in their spare time they had still gone to the physical skills combat hall to spar with others for the fun of it. They too had sensed the benefits mecha combat had brought to their physical skills. During their spars, they had been able to instantly discover their opponent's openings. Undoubtedly, their physical skills and vision had improved greatly from when they had first entered the academy. Won't the other factions interfere? If they too know about these people, they will not let us monopolize them. Someone else brought up another issue. Hackers. Our school only has a few names on record, and they all only belong to the top 4 factions. However, I am the first to obtain this information. In order to delay the others, I've even added some precautions of my own, so they'll need to spend some time to crack it. Though I don't know when they'll be able to break through, I have been watching their progress. Still, this matter should not be dragged out. If it's dragged out too long, and the others obtain the real data as well, we may very likely end up with nothing to show for our efforts too, explained Lin Zidong. So, we need to issue a challenge to the new cadet regiment and settle things. Once we succeed in absorbing them into our fold, even if the other factions discover the truth, then they will not dare to offend us with the regiment commander around. That's good. Looks like we need to issue our challenge as soon as possible. All those seated here finally came to an agreement, and they began discussing when they should issue their letter of challenge to the new cadet regiment. Chapter 242. Letter of Challenge. In reality, the new cadet regiment received the letter of challenge even earlier than Linglan had predicted. 2 days after their discussion, the new cadet regiment's public regiment commander, Wu Jiang, received Lting's letter of challenge. On that day, around noon, Qi Long, Wu Jiang, and the others from the mecha piloting class A had just completed their brutal physical training for the morning, dragging their tired selves to the large military academy canteen to eat. They had barely sat down and taken a few bites when a raucous commotion broke out by the canteen doors, causing the initially noisy canteen to instantly fall silent. Which of you is the regiment commander for the new cadet regiment? Show yourself to accept this letter of challenge. The one who spoke was a cadet dressed in a blue military-style uniform. He swept a gaze over the people within the canteen, his haughty expression seeming to view them as trash. Behind him were 5 or 6 cadets also dressed in the same uniform. Based on the uniform color alone, it was clear that they were definitely part of the top 500 brilliant students within the military academy. The basic color of the military academy uniforms was green, signifying the average student. Blue represented the top 500 outstanding cadets in the school, based on their cumulative grades from all aspects. Meanwhile, the ducks 2 of each specialization of each year would be wearing the glorious white uniform exclusive to them. This was a reward for the elite of the elites, as well as a type of respect accorded to them. Take the Thunder King for example. He was the ducks of the 4th year mecha piloting specialization, so his uniform was the only white one among those of that year within that specialization. Initially, there had been a few other people dressed in blue uniforms who had been eating, who had turned with expressions of irritation at being disturbed, but when they saw the badge pinned on the chests of the interrupting group, their expressions shifted, and the rage on their faces faded away. This was because they knew which faction that badge represented. It wasn't something they could afford to go up against. Wu Jiang and Qi Long shared a knowing glance. That night, Ling Lan had already assembled them and told Wu Jian, Li Yingji, and the other team leaders of her suppositions. Thus, they had constantly been waiting for Alting's move, and now they had finally come. What, is the new cadet regiment so gutless, not daring to accept Alting's letter of challenge? Mocked the youth in the blue uniform. He had already been informed by the upper ranks that he must enrage the leaders of the new cadet regiment, so they would accept the letter of challenge on impulse. Of course, if they refused to accept no matter how he taunted, then he would throw down this ultimatum. The regiment commander of the new cadet regiment would have to go to Alting's headquarters to apologize personally to the vice-regiment commanders, otherwise they would not be spared. Qi Long threw a glance at Wu Jian. For this type of antagonistic scenario, his affable face was not at all suitable. In Boss Lan's words, Qi Long had a goofy nice guy face, much more suited for acting innocent and shifting blame after the new cadet regiment had gone out to bully others. Wu Jian understood tacitly what he should do. He used his chopsticks to wrap the dishware before him, and then with a harsh throw, his chopsticks smacked loudly onto the metal table, emitting a crisp loud clang. The atmosphere of the initially silent canteen became fraught with tension due to this sharp noise. With a subtle smirk on his lips, Wu Jian leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed before him as he said evenly, I am the regiment commander of the new cadet regiment. Speak if you have something to say, fart if you have to. 3. Boss Lan had said before, they absolutely could not lose in terms of attitude. These past few years, although Wu Jian had always been suppressed by Ling Lan and Qi Long, he had still been an active participant and leader in the Grand Armed Melee back then, as well as in the fight for the spaceship's administrative rights. These victories made him composed and confident, and because he had always been pressed down by others more exceptional than him, he had not become overconfident and arrogant. Right now, even though he was facing the military academy's #1 faction Alting, his heart was as calm as ever, not at all apprehensive. This attitude of Wu Jian's was clearly out of Alting's expectations. Rage emerged on their faces, and the lead youth in particular took one step forward and yelled, Punk, you watch your mouth. Wu Jian threw a cool glance over and said calmly, What, you have something to say? The clear contempt in Wu Jian's gaze made those people step forward instinctively, faces overcome with rage as they seemed intent on teaching Wu Jian a lesson. But before they could get any closer, the new cadets who had originally been seated quietly in the canteen suddenly all stood up in a clatter. They glared angrily at the people from Alting, as if warning them that if they dared step any closer, then the new cadets could not be blamed for not being courteous anymore. Seeing 300 over people stand up all together in one go, the expressions of the 5 or 6 people from Alting paled abruptly. Their steps faltered, and after several changes in complexion, the head youth in blue actually began to laugh. Ha ha, that earlier was just a joke. Seeing the new cadet regiment so united, Wilting feel very heartened by this. You all are worthy to fight against Alting. This person was extremely thick-skinned. Even as he flattered the new cadet regiment, he did not forget to elevate his own faction. He smiled gently at Wu Jian and asked, This regiment commander, how may I address you? Wu Jian uncrossed his arms to tap his fingers lightly against the surface of the table. He stared at the head youth with a half-smile. This familiar expression made Qi Long and those in his team feel an ache in their teeth. Please, no matter how much you idolize our boss, you really don't have to learn his mannerisms, right? They felt cold just looking at him. Perhaps this expression of Wu Jian's put a lot of pressure on the head youth, for his smile actually slipped off his face. In the end, he could only stand there awkwardly, unsure how to wrap things up. As expected, this expression of Boss Lan's could really do a lot of damage. He would have to use it more in the future. It was enough to subdue some minor characters. Wu Jian tucked away this expression, satisfied, and opened his mouth to say, My surname is Wu. You may call me Regiment Commander Wu. Regiment Commander Wu. Impressive as expected. With you to lead them, the new cadet regiment will certainly do well. The head youth immediately threw up a thumbs up in response, expressing his heartfelt admiration. Since mockery and pressure would not work, He could only try cajoling. As long as the other side accepted their challenge, he would find a way to avenge this humiliation. No matter how the head tried to hide it, the indignation in his eyes had still been detected by Qilong and the others. However, since they were already determined to clash with Lting anyway, they really did not care whether the other was offended or not. May Regiment Commander Wu please accept this letter of challenge from Lting? With such an exceptional opponent as yourselves, we of Lting are also overjoyed. Under the glares of over 300 people, the blue-clothed head youth nervously walked over to Wu Jian, withdrew a rectangular card from his pocket, and handed it over with both hands. Right then, a hand intercepted to take the card. It was Yizu, who was seated beside Wu Jian. At this moment, he had already stood up, snatching the card over with one hand to then pass it to Wu Jian. Only then did Wu Jian accept the card and open it. Inside, it was written that 3 days later, the two sides would engage in a physical skills showdown at the combat hall. Both sides would send 5 representatives, with winning 3 out of 5 being the winning condition. On top of that, there would be an additional wager involved, to be disclosed on the day of the showdown, and it cannot be refused for. Sure enough, Lting's objective was their new cadet regiment as a whole. Boss Lan's predictions were not wrong. Seeing this, Wu Jian knew for certain what was going on. That wager was definitely for the new cadet regiment to join Lting. Alright, 3 days later, at the combat hall, be there or be square. Wu Jian snapped the card shut again, and replied with firm conviction. This had already been pre-discussed, so Wu Jian naturally dared to accept right away. Good. Regiment Commander Wu is refreshingly straightforward as expected. 3 days later, we'll await your grand presence at the combat hall. His mission complete, the head youth of the Lting group was all smiles. At this time, from another table, Li Yingji threw a cold glare their way and said imperiously, "Since you're done with your bullshit, you can scram." The people from Lting had been frozen in place by the sheer force of presence of Wu Jian and those 300 or so people, and now they were being openly derided by some punk from who knows where. They were abnormally frustrated. They had no way to oppose the new cadet regiment's regiment commander Wu, but teaching this pompous brat should be fine, right? And so, several people began moving towards Li Yingji with sinister intent. Li Yingji flicked his fingers and kicked away the chair behind him, saying with a cold smile, "What, want to fight?" With this one sound, a flurry of the screeching noises of chairs being shifted rose throughout the canteen. The 300 or so people who had been standing in place, glaring angrily at them, had actually pushed away their chairs and begun moving closer, several of them already rubbing their palms together in anticipation of a fight. With that, they could not be unaware that this cocky punk before them was definitely someone from the upper ranks of the new cadet regiment. The blue-clothed head youth could no longer hold back the rage in his heart. He pointed an angry finger at Li Yingji and said savagely, "Fine." 3 days later, just you wait. That said, he led his posse to scurry away, sent off by a wave of raucous scram from behind, compounding their shame. Ever since joining Lting, they had always been above others, playing the role of the bullies, but today, they were treated to a taste of being bullied mercilessly by others, and it was almost enough to make them shatter and swallow their teeth. 5. Seeing the people from Lting scurry away, only then did Wu Jian pass the letter of challenge to Qilong across from him. Qilong flipped it open to read, and instantly began to chuckle coldly. As boss expected, Lting has really taken us, the new cadet regiment, for a fish fillet on the chopping block, ready for them to cut as they will. At this moment, Wu Jian was already anxiously looking for his chopsticks. Earlier, to create the right atmosphere, he had coolly thrown his chopsticks onto the desk, and now he had no idea where they had flown to. His poor stomach was so hungry it was about to revolt. If he still did not eat, he would become the first regiment commander to faint from hunger. For the sake of aiding the new cadet regiment's stand, he did not have it easy. "I can't take it anymore, lend me your chopsticks." Seeing Qilong's chopsticks set on the table, Wu Jian could bear it no longer, taking it into his hands to begin eating rapaciously. Boo-hoo-hoo. The morning's physical training had already squeezed him dry of his vital energy. If he did not replenish it, he would really starve to death. No, those are mine. Exasperated, Qilong threw aside the letter of challenge in his hands, wanting to snatch his chopsticks back, but Wu Jian was a step quicker. He dashed over to the next dining table, not forgetting to say as he went, "I supported you in acting out his scene. You should repay me somehow. Lending me your chopsticks can be considered repayment." Qilong directed a rude gesture at Wu Jian, but did not continue to give chase. Wu Jian was not wrong. He should have been the one to step up and accept that letter of challenge. But he was very hungry too. Although he had eaten a bit more than Wu Jian earlier, his appetite was naturally voracious. How could those few bites earlier be enough to satisfy his stomach, which was equally bawling from hunger? His gaze turned, and he saw Han Zhijian eating seriously beside him, bite by measured bite, slow and methodical, not at all impatient or hurried. It was as if he were not at all hungry, and was only eating to complete the mission of eating. "Oh Zhijian, since you aren't that hungry, then first take care of your big bro here." Qilong cheerfully snatched away the chopsticks from Han Zhijian's unresisting hand and then began happily eating again. Han Zhijian stared blankly at his now empty right hand, and then turned to look at the joyfully eating Qilong. He almost wanted to dump the dishes before his eyes onto Qilong's head. Was there a sworn brother who would do such a thing? Not causing trouble for others, but troubling one of his own instead? At another table, Lin Zonking saw this scene and let out a soft sigh. He took out a small pouch from his waist, drawing out a few short metal sticks from inside it. Screwing them together, it took but a few moments for him to produce a pair of regular-sized chopsticks, which he then passed silently to Han Zhijian. Receiving the chopsticks, Han Zhijian tamped down on his anger and resumed eating. In his mind, he decided that he would definitely not help Qilong next time. No matter how much Boss Lan bullied Qilong, he would turn his head and pretend he saw nothing. 6. The news of the new cadet regiment's haughty acceptance of Lting's letter of challenge soon spread throughout the entire military academy. Those various large factions which had always been suppressed by Lting were naturally gleeful at their misfortune. It was unexpected that the forceful Lting would also have times where they had their faces smacked so hard. However, they did not believe that the new cadet regiment could withstand Lting's subsequent vengeance. They were all waiting for the new cadet regiment to disperse under the pressure, and were prepared to slip in the aftermath to take advantage of the panic and chaos to bring those lost new cadets into their own factions. Just as everyone was waiting to see the downfall of the new cadet regiment, only Li Lan greeted the news with deep contemplation, his expression serious and considering. Chapter 243, The Distance Between the Two. Li Lan's attitude was only clear to one person by his side, Zhao Jun. Zhao Jun was a little bemused by it, asking, "Why, do you have some other insight?" Li Lan lifted his head to glance at Zhao Jun, and said contemplatively, "The new cadet regiment accepted the letter of challenge in such a high-handed fashion. It's clear to see that they have full confidence in themselves." Zhao Jun did not think much of it. The students from the Doha Central Scout Academy have always thought highly of themselves, somewhat blind to reality. Wasn't Zhang Jing'an exactly like this back then? Clashing with the Thunder King right from the start, and now he doesn't even dare to make a peep, tucking his tail between his legs whenever he sees the Thunder King. Zhao Jun rubbed his jaw. Right now, I really want to see the faces of those new cadets after they've been thoroughly thrashed by Lting. Their expressions must be very interesting. Li Lan breathed out slowly and silently, then asked softly, "That aberrant who Zhang Jing'an is still so conscious about after 3 years, could he only be at the level of someone like Zhang Jing'an?" At these words, Zhao Jun's expression shifted. He too recalled the secret news he had uncovered from Zhang Jing'an's faction. That aberrant was someone who Zhang Jing'an hated so much his teeth gnashed, but even so, Zhang Jing'an still had not dared to make a move, forcefully holding back his anger to watch the new cadet regiment establish itself with cold eyes. "Who exactly is that aberrant?" "I heard that the one who presented himself to accept the letter of challenge was a youth called Wu Jian. He claimed to be Regiment Commander Wu of the new cadet regiment." Could it be him? Zhao Jun was not very good at analyzing data. Regiment Commander Wu? Have you ever heard of a true regiment commander being addressed with a surname attached? Only the second or third in command, those vice-regiment commanders and such, would have their surnames attached to the title, for convenience of distinction, said Li Lan calmly. A cold light flashed through Zhao Jun's eyes. In other words, the true regiment commander of the new cadet regiment has not yet shown himself. Showing one's trump card right from the start, now that would be stupid, replied Li Lan. So, I have my reservations on the outcome of Lting's operation this time. Right then, Li Lan's mind was filled with the information on this batch of new cadets he had gleaned from the S-tier of the military academy mainframe. Those were not a bunch of ordinary new cadets. If the people from Lting underestimated them, without the Thunder King to hold down the fort, Lting might really end up capsizing their boat in a ditch. Of course, it would be his pleasure to see the Thunder King suffer a loss. At this moment, Ling Lan, who was in the mecha world desperately raising her level, did not know that Lting's letter of challenge had already been delivered into Wu Jiang's hands. However, Ling Lan had already asked the team leaders to inform their respective team members about their upcoming clash with Lting 2 days ago. Telling them served two purposes. One, was to let the regiment members know the decision of the new cadet regiment. Two, to distinguish those members within their organization who would veer with the wind. One, only thinking to use the new cadet regiment to establish themselves. Ling Lan believed that a faction's strength laid not in numbers, but in unity. Only if they were willing to share their trials and rewards equally would they be able to go far. She felt that the pressure from Lting this time would be a great opportunity to assess the will and motivation of the members of the new cadet regiment. As for Ling Lan's team, Qi Long and the gang would naturally follow their boss loyally. Meanwhile, Wu Jiang was extremely taken in by Ling Lan, for Ling Lan's many daring decisions had benefited him greatly. Moreover, 10 years of being schoolmates had shown Wu Jiang that Ling Lan was an extremely trustworthy person. He would never abandon any comrades that follow him. Thus, Wu Jiang was willing to fight alongside Ling Lan for a better future. He wasn't afraid, even if they lost terribly in the end. It would be a waste of their youth if they did not take wild risks. As for Li Yingji, even though he had always had a bit of a grudge towards Ling Lan and Qi Long, Ling Lan's strength truly left Li Yingji speechless. Additionally, Ling Lan did not do anything to restrain Li Yingji's temperament or personality, even outright stating that the arrogant tasks would be his responsibility. This made Li Yingji feel deep down as if he had finally found someone who understood him. Under these circumstances, when Ling Lan asked him whether he wanted to leave the regiment, Li Yingji had instantly refused. Li Yingji did not consider anything else. He only thought that since Ling Lan believed in him and trusted him, then he must live up to this trust too. Besides, when has the cocky Li Yingji ever been afraid of someone? The number one faction in the military academy? So what? He, Li Yingji, would not submit. This was his pride as a member of the first elite family of the Federation. As for the other students from the Central Scout Academy, Ling Lan's decisions had never disappointed them before, so even though they were somewhat unsure about things this time, they were still determined to push forward or retreat alongside Boss Lan. This was because they knew that if they did not resist, they would still be seen as potential slaves by the other factions. In that case, they might as well fight it out in a gamble. After all, in their eyes, Boss Lan was extremely strong and had never failed their expectations. Rather, it was the decision of the students from the other scout academies of Doha which surprised Ling Lan and the others. They had initially thought that a majority of these people would withdraw from the new cadet regiment, wisely choosing to protect themselves, but surprisingly, most did not want to quit, willing to advance and retreat together with the new cadet regiment. Only an extremely small number chose to quit, not even 30 people in total. Therefore, the total number of people in the new cadet regiment was still endlessly close to 500, not reduced by much. This made many factions which had wanted to see the new cadet regiment fall apart greatly disappointed. Especially Zhang Jing'an, who had wanted to take advantage of the situation to recruit people. Of course, it had to be said that these students' decision not to withdraw, Their willingness to fight with Ling Lan had a lot to do with one man's efforts. He was the one who had joined Ling Lan's party midway during the spaceship's operation, third elder brother Zhao Jianyun. During this period of time, Zhao Jianyun had built up quite a reputation among the students not from the Central Scout Academy. After all, he had been the only team leader who had participated in the plan to conquer the ship who was not from the Central Academy. Under his publicity efforts, Ling Lan's image rose to lofty heights in the new cadets' minds. Even though Ting was the #1 faction in the school, in these new cadets' eyes, that boss Lan, who was strong enough to defeat the captain, was no weaker than Lting's regiment commander, the Thunder King, and this was the main reason why they were willing to support Ling Lan in this clash. Their way of thinking was undeniably extremely naive, exactly like that of a newbie. But newborn calves are not afraid of tigers 3, and sometimes, what looked like a reckless action would turn out to be a momentous turn capable of changing one's fate. That night, Wu Jiang and the others brought the letter of challenge right away to Ling Lan's villa to pass it to her. Ling Lan sat on the sofa in the hall and calmly opened the letter. When she saw the contents of the challenge, the corner of her lips quirked up involuntarily. Sure enough, their challenge is one of physical skills. This is our chance. Wu Jiang's expression did not ease by much. They will definitely send the combat experts of the higher grades, perhaps even seniors of the 6th year. They are older than us by 5 years. 5 years' time is enough to pull apart from us by a whole realm. Wu Jiang was currently only at refinement stage. If the opponent sent only those from Qijin stage, they would lose for certain if they only relied on Qilong and Ling Lan. Not necessarily, replied Ling Lan decisively. How so? Asked Wu Jiang uncomprehendingly. Jijian, can you find the course curriculum for all 6 years of our mecha piloting specialization? Ling Lan abruptly turned her head to ask Han Jijian. Although Han Jijian was not sure why Ling Lan would ask about this, he still nodded and began looking up the course info of the military academy on his communicator. In the end, he connected his communicator to the largest virtual projection system of the villa walls, to display the contents of his search. Wu Jiang, take a look. What do we have to learn in our 6 years here? Said Ling Lan, pointing at the info displayed on the screen. Wu Jiang cast a baffled look at Ling Lan, but still strode forwards without any objections. He scanned the screen quickly and was struck with realization. So that's how it is. In our 6 years, there really aren't many physical skills courses. That's right. In our 6 years here, the military academy focuses on cultivating our mecha piloting skills, and not our physical combat skills. Thus, the upper years would not have put much attention and effort on physical combat skills, so the gap between us and the seniors should not be as wide as you might imagine. Ling Lan stated her thoughts. This is also why I believe we have a chance. In terms of physical combat, I believe the students of our Central Academy are definitely the best, said Ling Lan with steely conviction. Yep, boss, you're right. Qilong was the first to respond enthusiastically. Although the others did not say anything, the initial worry and grimness in their eyes had faded, and their gazes began to shine. Qilong and the others had regained their confidence so swiftly because Ling Lan's words were not pure consolation, but rooted in truth. Compared to the other scout academies, the Central Scout Academy was undoubtedly one which placed the most emphasis on physical combat skills. It could be said that among the exceptional combat experts within the military academy right now, a large portion were from the Central Scout Academy. Only a handful were from the Scout Academies from other planets. Of course, good physical combat skills did not equate to good mecha piloting skills. As mentioned previously, the talent for mecha piloting was different from the talent needed for physical combat, which was why those with good combat talent may not necessarily become excellent mecha operators. This was also why Zhang Jing'an and his group had been finding it harder and harder to thrive within the military academy. Mind you, from the 2nd year of admission to the academy onwards, after the cadets officially become mecha operators, the competition between students was no longer centered on physical combat, but on mecha-operated combat. But, even if we survive this time, What if other organizations come after us? Although Wu Jiang now had confidence, he was still worried about the future of the new cadet regiment. If those other factions came after them one after another, even if they were made of iron, they would eventually be beaten down. Don't worry, after we win this time, the other factions will not come after us, said Ling Lan evenly. Why? Asked Wu Jiang. If even the first faction Lting cannot take us down on physical skills, can they do it? Replied Ling Lan. I reckon that even if they challenge us again, it will definitely be after we officially become mecha operators. That time will truly be our most difficult time. Not only will we have to fend off Lting's revenge, the other factions will also be waiting to strike. The Thunder King would not allow the new cadet regiment that had sullied the reputation of Lting to continue existing. For some reason, Ling Lan actually recalled those words of, "No mecha unrepaired." The Thunder King was not someone who could be easily reasoned with. Although Ling Lan's tone was dark and heavy, her face displayed no sign of pressure, calm as ever as she said, however, at that time, we will no longer be freshmen. 2 years' time is enough for us to gather our strength. Only then did Ling Lan look towards Wu Jiang and say, of course, this period of time won't be easy for us. We'll need to raise our mecha piloting skills as quickly as possible. Otherwise, 2 years later, lacking strength, we will still become fish meat on a chopping board, free for anyone to slice and dice. Chapter 244, My Goal. Wu Jiang's expression turned cold and his gaze became solemn. It looks like we'll need to work hard. Hopefully 1-2 years later, our new cadet regiment will be able to become one of the top 4 factions in the academy. At that time, even if the Thunder King wants to consume us, he will have to stop and think about it. Ling Lan threw an icy glance over and said with a huff, you only have that little bit of ambition? Wu Jiang was dumbfounded. Boss Lan, my goal is not being one of the factions. Ling Lan's words made Wu Jiang somewhat confused, unsure what in the world Ling Lan was trying to say. However, Ling Lan's following words almost made him fall over in shock. Ling Lan raised a finger to point straight up as he too said coldly, my goal is to unite the factions of the military academy. In other words, by the time I leave the military academy, there will only be one faction in the school, and that will be ours. Ling Lan's face was cold as ever, his expression extremely serious. It was clear to see that everything he had said was from his true heart. Despite his stature and build not being as imposing as Wu Jiang's, his force of presence was absolute in its domination of the scene, suppressing everyone present. This made Wu Jiang lament once more the distance between him and Ling Lan. Ling Lan could become the boss, not only because he had enough strength and capability, but also because he dared to think the unthinkable. Alright, Boss Lan. Just based on these words of yours alone, I, Li Yingji, acknowledge you full-heartedly as my boss. A voice carried over from the doorway. Wu Jiang did not have to turn his head to know who it was. Li Yingji. This stubborn, prickly, and insubordinate fellow had finally admitted his deference towards Ling Lan. Li Yingji's admission similarly surprised Ling Lan. With a quirk of her brow, she teased, I thought that I was already your boss since a long while back. Li Yingji choked, the color of his face fluctuating unpredictably, and he finally deflated and said, forget it. Since I've already acknowledged you as boss, you can just say whatever you want. Li Yingji could not refuse to submit. He could not beat Ling Lan in a fight, and he did not have as much guts as the other either. And now, he had even lost to Ling Lan in terms of sheer arrogance. What right did he have still to refute Ling Lan's words? Li Yingji's defeated manner made Ling Lan feel rather sorry for him. In the end, she still liked the cocky Li Yingji better, so Ling Lan pointed at the sofa beside her and said, sit, Li Yingji. I do not wish for you to lose your personality, as long as you are capable enough. I don't think there is anything wrong with being arrogant. In future, if there's anything you can't handle, just look for the others, and if they can't handle it either, come find me. Following Ling Lan's words, Li Yingji's expression lifted up proudly once more, his eyes shining with vibrant light. Behind him, an invisible tail rose higher and higher. Wu Jiang, Qi Long, and the others turned away speechlessly, unable to watch. Oh, this innocent child, once again being coaxed by Boss Lan onto the path of being a great rogue. He had obviously had the opportunity to change his ways and return to the proper path. Ling Lan looked at Li Yingji's expression and felt rather guilty. Bewitching an innocent babe like this to do bad things, would she be struck down by lightning? Time passed swiftly, and very soon it was time for the wagered fight between Lting and the new cadet regiment. The exclusive combat hall of the military academy had long been filled with students from the various years. Of course, a large majority of the students were there to see Lting torment the new cadets. Only very few new cadets still carried a tendril of hope that the new cadet regiment, which was also made up of freshmen, would be able to create a miracle, and do them freshmen proud. Li Lan and Zhao Jun both arrived a bit late, but they did not have to squeeze and shoulder their way to a good position at the front of the arena stage. As high-ranking members of one of the 4 top factions in the military academy, one of the VIP boxes in the combat hall was reserved exclusively for them. They took an elevator up, and then walked to stand before one of the rooms to the side. On the door was a square screen of roughly 30 centimeters. Li Lan raised his right hand and waved it at the screen, and then the room door slid lightly to the left, revealing an entrance of about 2 meters wide. The two of them did not hesitate, entering right away. The moment they entered, a voice could be heard to say, "Ha ha, speak of the devil for Lan, come, let me introduce you to a talented young fellow." Li Lan looked in the direction of the voice and saw Han Yi sitting on a sofa waving at him in a rather irreverent manner. Meanwhile, a fresh-faced lanky youth of about 1.8 meters tall was standing tall beside him. He was presumably a new cadet from this year's batch, and the youth was currently observing him smilingly, a trace of respect in his gaze. Li Lan's lips curved up slightly, revealing a slight smile, making his entire being seem endlessly warm. This smile startled the other, however, a thread of confusion flashing through his eyes, but the other quickly got a hold of himself to regain his original expression. The smile on Li Lan's lips grew deeper. He turned to look at Han Yi, who had been observing his expression intently, and as if not at all aware of Han Yi's previous impolite attitude, he smiled easily and said, "Han Yi, how nice. Congratulations on gaining yet another great fighter. However, no matter how glad you are, you still need to test him well. Don't let some pretender slip in and profit from the confusion again." Li Lan's words made Han Yi's complexion shift slightly. They made him recall when he had happily taken in a bunch of freshmen who had come from his planet a few days ago. Back then, he had brought those new recruits over here to show off to Li Lang because not a single person from Li Lang's third-rate planet Azure had managed to get into the first men's military academy this time. Unexpectedly, those recruits had all been useless fellows. The moment they were pressured by Zhao Jun's aura, they had all actually cowered with their tails tucked between their legs, not daring to say another word. Those timid and cowardly expressions still made him furious when he recalled them now. The reactions of those people had truly disgraced their planet Wuji. All this was because Zhao Jun and Li Lang were both from third-rate planets. The two were from different planets though. Zhao Jun was from planetary Drak 5, while Li Lang came from planet Azure. Meanwhile, planet Wuji was a first-rate planet within the Federation, much better in terms of both level, treatment, and resources than the third-rate planets. Therefore, losing face in front of Zhao Jun and Li Lang was extremely infuriating for Han Yi. Han Yi took a good look at Li Lang, trying to see if the other was intentionally making a crack at him. However, Li Lang's eyes were unbelievably clear and limpid, and his warm smile and gentle aura had not a single shred of malicious intent in it. Could it be that he was overthinking things? Han Yi could not see anything strange about Li Lang's demeanor, so he sniffed coolly and said, "HMPH, would I make the same mistake again?" He pointed at the youth beside him and continued, "Lang, this is my junior, his name is Zhuya 6. His specialization is military strategy, and he is the first rank in the military strategy specialization among this year's freshmen." When he said this, Han Yi's expression was proud, not forgetting to glance at Li Lan to gauge his expression to see if there was any change. Sadly, his efforts were all in vain. Li Lan's expression was no different from usual, as calm as ever. Han Yi deflated slightly, turning his head to introduce to the youth, "This is the strategist of our Wuji Mecha clan, Li Lan. In future, you should learn well from Big Brother Li. Wuji's future will eventually depend on you and your strategies." Big Brother Li, hello, please watch out for me in future. Zhuya gave Li Lan a military academy cadet bow, his gaze curious as his eyes roved over this gentle-mannered youth before him. Before Li Lan arrived, Regiment Commander Han Yi had hinted that he hoped Zhuya would be able to replace Li Lan and take his position quicker, to become the primary strategist of the Wuji Mecha clan. Hearing that, he was naturally extremely moved. Regiment Commander Han Yi's words proved the others' trust and acknowledgement of him. Still, he would not become proud and self-conceited because of this and defend Li Lan recklessly. Frankly, in his conversation with Regiment Commander Han Yi, Zhuya had vaguely made out the regiment commander's wariness towards Li Lan. This proved that the other was absolutely not someone to be crossed easily. Otherwise, he would not have been able to retain such a secure hold on the primary strategist position within the Mecha clan as someone not from planet Wuji. Li Lan politely returned a bow of his own, and said with a smile, "Zhuya, right? Don't be so formal. I'm not specializing in strategy. It's just that Regiment Commander Han Yi was lacking such an important role, so he made do with me filling in. Now you're here, I can take the burden off my shoulders." It's like Regiment Commander Han Yi said, "The future of the Wuji Mecha clan will depend on you all." Done speaking, Li Lan did not forget to pat Zhuya's shoulder in encouragement. Then, seeking out a random sofa, he sat down. True to his words, his expression was clearly much more relaxed, as if he had genuinely spoken from the heart. This made Han Yi and Wei Ji, both of who had been closely observing Li Lan, to furrow their brows. This was why they had always been wary of Li Lan. Li Lan's expression was always very composed, gentle, and unassuming. It could perhaps even be described as somewhat easygoing and content with one's lot. But would there really be a cadet, outstanding on all fronts, who had no ambition whatsoever? Both their gazes involuntarily met once more, reading the same suspicion in the other's eyes. Wei Ji turned his gaze away and suppressed the misgivings in his heart. Standing up, he greeted with a smile, "Zhao Jun, what are you standing at the door for? Still not coming over to sit? I too happen to have a talent from Wuji for you to meet." He pointed at the seat next to his, indicating for Zhao Jun to come over. Zhao Jun had initially been coldly watching the attacks, both open and covert, being exchanged among the people in the room. Now, seeing Wei Ji calling him, a trace of interest instantly appeared on his austere face. He walked forwards, eyes trained on the youth with a somewhat lazy expression standing by Wei Ji's side, and asked seriously, "A prodigy at mecha piloting?" Wei Ji choked at those words, and said sulkily, "Zhao Jun, you know that these students have just started working with mecha. No matter how talented, it would be impossible to tell in such a short amount of time." Zhao Jun threw a disgruntled glare at Wei Ji. "You know very well that I am only interested in mecha piloting. Why would you mislead me?" Wei Ji prodded at Zhao Jun helplessly for a moment, finally saying with a bitter chuckle, "Fine, fine, fine. Just say it's my fault." But this Wang Hu is a combat genius from our planet Wuji, already at the optimal peak of refinement stage, just a half step away from entering Qijin stage. Wei Ji's tone was threaded with a faint trace of pride. Mind you, these past few years, Zhang Jing'an was the only one who had already advanced into the early stage of Qijin before entering the military academy. The others, no matter how strong, had only been at refinement. Even the number one of the military academy, the Thunder King Qiaoting, had only been at the peak of refinement when he had first entered the academy, a level weaker than Wang Hu. Of course, when the Thunder King had been a freshman, he had already displayed his terrifying talent in mecha piloting, which was how he had begun suppressing Zhang Jing'an ever since the second year. By now, He had completely left Zhongjing and several horse heads behind 7, shooting straight up to become the number 1 of the military academy. Chapter 245, The Ducks Lishu. Without question, the Thunder King was a marvel, and Wei Ji hoped that Wang Hua could reproduce this miraculous achievement of the Thunder King. That way, a few years later, when the Thunder King graduated and left the military academy, it would be the time for their Wuji Mecha clan to rise to the top. Learning of Wang Hua's combat level, Zhao Jun's eyes flashed brightly. Not bad. With the addition of these 2 talents, Wu Ji's future is boundless. Zhao Jun's words made Han Yu and Wei Ji laugh, pleased. In contrast to the shrewd and unfathomable Li Lan, Zhao Jun, who only knew to fight, was much simpler. His words would never twist and turn. What was said was what he meant. Having said that, Zhao Jun clapped Wang Hua on the shoulder approvingly, then walked over to sit down beside Li Lan. This move of Zhao Jun's made Han Yu and Wei Ji frown, a trace of frustrated regret in their eyes. Back then, they should not have tried some petty tricks in order to keep Zhao Jun in check through fear, thus enraging him, giving Li Lan the chance to become the mediator between the 2 sides. From there, Li Lan had gained Zhao Jun's friendship, resulting in their current close relationship. If Zhuya really succeeded in replacing Li Lan, they might still be unable to chase away Li Lan too obviously, to force him to resign from his post within the clan. Over these past few years of cooperation, they had came to learn that Zhao Jun was a very loyal and steadfast person, definitely someone who would sacrifice his life for a friend. If Zhao Jun became discontented with them over Li Lan, he might choose to leave the Wuji Mecha clan in a fit of rage to follow Li Lan, and that would be a major loss for them. Zhao Jun was a genius at mecha piloting, strong enough to squeeze into the top 3 of their year. Excluding Li Lan's strategic planning, Zhao Jun was integral to the Wuji Mecha clan's secure 3rd place ranking. If the 2 of them went off to join another faction because of this, it would very likely affect the position of their Wuji Mecha clan among the school factions. Han Yu's and Wei Ji's eyes met, sharing a glance, conveying their tacit decision to temporarily set their plan aside and continue tolerating Li Lan a while longer. Zhuya and Wang Hua still needed some time to grow anyway. Their mecha clan indeed still needed Li Lan's strategic mind. Of course, they decided mentally that they would find a chance to drive a wedge between Li Lan and Zhao Jun in the interim. Once the 2 became at odds, it would be time for them to banish Li Lan. So decided, the 2 began conversing enthusiastically with Li Lan and Zhao Jun. Not long after, a dark well within the box suddenly lit up. It turned out that this was a high-tech screen, and it was currently set up for direct viewing without any segmentations. Of course, it was also possible to choose to dissect the screen into several windows for multiple viewing angles. Right then, on the arena stage dominating the screen, several youths in blue uniforms suddenly appeared. Their expressions were composed and proud. It was the delegation from the Ulting Mecha clan. With that, the 4 of them in the box stopped their conversation, turning their eyes to the large screen. In the dark box, facing the screen, no one saw Li Lan's smile turn mocking from its initial warmth, and his clear gaze became deep and dark. The current Li Lan was no longer at all kind and approachable, instead emitting a cold edge. The moment the Ulting people got on the stage, they received the passionate cheers of all the students in the audience of the combat hall. The Federation had always championed the rule of survival of the fittest, and this was displayed most vividly within the military academy. The Ulting Mecha clan was the strongest faction in the military academy, and so obtained the acknowledgement and respect of the majority of the cadets. At this moment, the other boxes on the 2nd floor were gradually being claimed by their respective owners. Practically all the people in the boxes took the cheers coming from the combat hall below as a matter of fact, absolutely certain that the final victors would be Ulting. Only in one particular corner of one of the boxes was there someone worrying about the fate of the new Cadet Regiment 1. FCK, the whole hall is cheering for Ulting. No one thinks the new Cadet Regiment will win. Honestly speaking, I don't think the new Cadet Regiment has any hope of winning either. I say, Has your younger cousin brother's head been shot at before? Actually daring to accept Lting's letter of challenge? In that box, a baby-faced youth in a blue uniform abruptly smacked his hands onto the arms of his sofa, his entire expression a mask of rage at the perceived incompetence. Standing before the screen, a person in a white uniform was standing tall with his back to the baby-faced youth. He cut a dashing figure, and with a hand on the frame of the screen, he replied without even turning back, "It's fine since he has already accepted. At least I'll be able to see how much this younger cousin brother of mine who has always been aiming for the first inheritance rights has grown." Just for that reason, that's why you actually emerged from your laboratory to come see this competition that he is destined to lose? The baby-faced youth's face was filled with incredulity. He knew his sworn brother ever since they had entered the first men's military academy, and he had chosen to specialize in military medical research. It was like he had been possessed by a demon. Day and night, he was always at the laboratory with his instructors researching the various strange and bizarre diagnostic and treatment questions known to the Federation at present. Perhaps he truly had talent in this respect, for he actually managed to successfully produce several treatment procedures in the course of his research, which after practical real-world testing, were discovered to be extremely effective. As a result of his exceptional performance on these course problems, from the start of the second year, he had successfully become the dux of the military medical research specialization. Since then, the position of dux had seemed reserved for him alone, never to budge. The baby-faced youth had always believed that if the Thunder King was a peerless prodigy in mecha piloting, then his good friend, Li Shu, was certainly a horrifyingly aberrant existence in the medical field. The two dominated over the masses in their respective domains, becoming the indisputable number ones of their fields. Lose, Li Shu muttered to himself. At this moment, 5 more figures appeared on the arena stage, dressed in the average cadet's green uniform. It was the 5 representatives of the new cadet regiment here to participate in the physical skills combat showdown. Through the screen, Li Shu stared at the cocky punk who was standing with his arms crossed on the stage. His initially handsome face instantly became dark and foreboding, as he bit out word by word, "If that punk loses, I will make him pay the price." The latent energy-spurring gene agent S modification that he had just developed recently, didn't it just happen to be lacking some human experimental candidates? Perhaps Li Yingji would be a suitable experiment subject. At this moment, Li Yingji, who had his chin lifted up defiantly, suddenly felt a chill pass through his body. He could not help but shiver, causing Luo Lang beside him to glance at him disapprovingly. "You're afraid now?" Li Yingji glared at Luo Lang, and shot back, "Who's afraid?" There was just a gust of cold wind earlier. Cold wind? Luo Lang looked around at this fully enclosed combat hall with not a single gap for airflow. The temperature forever maintained at 20 degrees by the thermostat. In this place where not a trace of wind could be created. A cold wind? Who was he trying to fool? Luo Lang sniffed and rolled his eyes, no longer paying any mind to the cowardly Li Yingji beside him. He had originally thought that the always cocky Li Yingji did not know what fear was, but the other was unexpectedly just a tiger in a cave, only cocksure and domineering in its own den. Luo Lang's sniff clearly revealed his true opinion, which caused Li Yingji's complexion to flush and pale erratically. He wished dearly that he could grab hold of the other's collar and yell in his face, "What the hell are you sniffing for? Everything this bro has said is the truth." There really had been a blast of cold wind, or else why would this bro shiver? Unfortunately, reality did not permit Li Yingji to do so. He could only suppress the urge to right this misunderstanding and put aside his shame for now. In his heart, he decided that he must obtain victory in the fighting ring. He would use reality to tell Luo Lang that he, Li Yingji, had never been afraid of the opponent before. These things that happened on the stage could not be observed clearly by the spectating students. All they could see was a pretty youth and a prideful youth bending their heads close to exchange a few words, and then move apart again to stand still, patiently waiting for the referee the school administration had assigned to appear. The military academy permitted wagering on fights, whether official or personal. The only difference was that, Official fight wagers would be officiated over by the Academy's referee, while personal fight wagers would not involve the Academy in any way. Still, both types of wagering had one restriction: no deaths could be incurred. If an incident of death occurred, the Academy would dispatch a team to investigate, and if the offending side was discovered to have killed with intent, the student or organization which had intentionally caused the death would be mercilessly court-martialed and tried under the full force of the law, the most severe punishment possible naturally being the death penalty. Thus, even if there was discord or conflict among the cadets which was carried over into their wagers, the wagers would typically not result in any deaths. Of course, cases where the perpetrator intended to die along with their victim were not included in this. The fight wager between the two factions, Lting and the New Cadet Regiment, was an official fight wager, which was why a referee from the Academy would be present. This official wager was the result of agreement on both sides, because both sides were afraid that the other party would go back on their word. Mind you, the results of an official fight wager were guaranteed by the Academy. The moment the results were out, the wager would have to be fulfilled. Even if one party regretted the wager after the fact and wanted to renege on it, the other party could request for the school administration to step in and forcefully carry out the terms of the wager. Lting was determined to obtain the New Cadet Regiment. In order to ensure nothing went wrong, they would certainly choose an official fight wager. Meanwhile, the New Cadet Regiment had similar concerns, so, without any objection, the wager this time naturally became an official fight wager. "Shoo, look, that youth by your younger cousin brother's side is so pretty, just like a girl. Is he participating as well?" The baby-faced youth seemed exasperated at the sheer incompetence on display. "Heavens, does the New Cadet Regiment not have anyone else actually sending out such a delicate youth to fight? How could they bear to do so too?" Right then, Li Shitu laid eyes on Luo Wolang's appearance, and he was instantly stunned. Another face floated into his mind's eye, different, yet equally beautiful. No, that other face was even lovelier than the face of this youth before him, so beautiful that it almost felt as if it should not appear in the human world. Li Shi's heart abruptly spasmed violently. Was this the reason why the heavens was unwilling to give his eldest cousin brother a healthy body? Because he did not belong to this common world to begin with, and needed to be reclaimed? No, I will not allow it. Even if I have to fight against the heavens, I will keep Brother Milan here. Li Shi gripped the frame of the screen tightly, his fingers locked around it, savoring the pain traveling up through his fingers. It was as if this was the only way to soothe the wrenching pain in his heart. It was precisely due to this unbearable pain that he had chosen a different path without any regrets. Even if he would lose the inheritance rights to the Li family because of this, he would not regret it. A crisp crack rang out. A piece of the screen's frame had actually been shattered by Li Shi's iron grip. Babyface instantly jumped up and rushed over, taking Li Shi's hand in his even as he bemoaned, "Heavens, my points." Although this box was theirs by right for the year, anything inside that was destroyed would still needed to be paid for. Chapter 246, What virtues or abilities have you? Babyface carefully looked over Li Shi's fingers. Discovering no wounds, he instantly released a relieved sigh. If Li Shi's hands were at all damaged, he would definitely be dismembered by the senior colonel instructors of the Military Medical Research Branch of the Medical Faculty, and be made into a specimen to be experimented on. Mind you, Li Shi was a gem in the hearts of all the instructors in the Military Medical Research specialization. All the instructors wanted to take in Li Shi as their own true disciple. There had even been a large battle fought previously over the matter. In the end, the head of the Military Medical Research Branch, Major General Chi, had been unable to take it any longer, and had come out to declare Li Shi as the shared disciple of all the instructors. Only then did the fighting stop. This was also one of the reasons why Li Shi was so exceptional in his specialization. Seeing the worry on his friend's face, Li Shi's heart was moved. He took his hand back and said sheepishly, "Yun Ziyu, I'm fine." "That's good then. What happened earlier that made you so angry?" asked Yun Ziyu curiously. What exactly had triggered Li Shi? Li Shi looked towards Yun Ziyu, and sighed softly. You still remember the Grand Armed Melee that year, and that I wasn't in the school then?" Yun Xiu remembered, nodded and said, "Yes, back then I had lamented that it was such a shame you had to miss it. Otherwise you could have already had a chance to cross blows with your younger cousin brother." Then, recalling how Li Shi had changed when he had returned, his tone became regretful as he said, "I had originally thought that you would apply for the mecha piloting specialization in the First Men's Military Academy, but unexpectedly, when you came back, you suddenly told me you wanted to become a military doctor. Until now, I still cannot understand it." At this point of his recollection, Yun Xiu's face was filled with confusion. Even now he still wanted to understand why, after just leaving for a brief stint of half a month, Li Shi had returned with completely different dreams and goals. Even more so since Li Shi had been given the cold shoulder due to his decision. The second year after he chose to become a military doctor, Li Shi gained a newborn younger brother. This move by Li Shi's parents was proof that he had been abandoned by them. This was because for one to become the family head of the Li family, one had to be the strongest mecha operator within the Li family. Thus, Li Shi's decision was a clear declaration that he was voluntarily giving up in the fight to be the first inheritor for the position of family head. If Li Shi truly had no talent in mecha piloting, Yun Xiu would definitely have supported his good friend's decision. But the fact was that Li Shi's talent in mecha piloting was very high. In these 4 years in the military academy, Li Shi had put his full effort into medical research, only using the bare minimum required by the military academy to train in mecha control. But despite that, Li Shi still had no difficulty in advancing to the early stages of advanced mecha warrior. It was clear to see how talented Li Shi actually was in the mecha piloting. Every time this thought crossed his mind, Yun Xiu would lament the waste on behalf of his good friend. In the face of his good friend's questioning, Li Shi only pursed his lips, but did not reply. However, due to his good friend's reminder, the incident that year appeared once more in the forefront of his mind. That was when he had just reached the 10th year in the Scout Academy. He and his parents had been busy preparing for his application to the mecha piloting specialization in the First Men's Military Academy. But it was at this time when his grandfather, the current family head of the Li family, had suggested that he go visit his eldest cousin brother Li Milan. Ever since his eldest cousin brother had gone to Planet Azure, he had never once returned to Doha. 10 years' time did not make Li Shi forget about his eldest cousin brother. Rather, with the passing of time, after becoming numb to the cold ruthlessness of the Li family members as they fought among themselves for power and authority, the memory of the unique warm aura of his cousin was almost stark in contrast, engraved even more deeply into his heart. Thus, when his grandfather had suggested he take a vacation to visit his eldest cousin brother on Planet Azure, he had gladly agreed. However, he could not have known that this visit would end up changing his entire life. Li Shi recalled that pale face on that sickbed, those dull-colored lips, that limp person half laid up on the bed. Still, that person had smiled so warmly at him, his smile so pure and clean, without any trace of resentment. His eldest cousin brother was not oblivious to the Li family's machinations, but he was still living without a care. His eldest cousin brother's stamina was already very weak, unable to support speech for too long. Li Shi remembered how short the meeting with his cousin had been, only a brief 10 or so minutes. During that time, his eldest cousin brother had not said anything about their family, only mentioning some of his own insights, such as how one should observe more, listen more, learn more, and think more. Only then would one be able to see things clearer and project their thoughts further. Or, for example, how one should not blindly judge an incident or a person, for some incidents and people were not as simple as they appeared. How considering things from a few more angles would perhaps yield some new discovery. In the end, he had also said that the hardest things for people were tolerance and acceptance, especially when it came to some friends and relatives. Sometimes, if they made a mistake, one should not be so quick to heap on the blame. Instead, give the other a chance to right the wrong. Sometimes, taking a step back may yield even better results. He had said with a laugh that, Li Yingji, for example, who seemed so arrogant and bossy, was actually a good person at heart. Treat him with a bit more patience, and one may see more bright gleams of goodness and something different. Though Li Shi had felt that these words were a little strange, as if his eldest cousin brother had been trying to hint at something, he had not thought much of it back then. He had just listened quietly as his cousin spoke, greedily absorbing more of the other's warmth too. This was something the Li family in Doha could not provide, so he was hungry for it. Only when he had seen the sweat pouring from his eldest cousin brother's forehead from the strain did he bid farewell and depart very reluctantly. On the journey home, he settled down and contemplated those words his eldest cousin brother had said, and found something off about them. It was as if his eldest cousin brother had been trying to guide him. Back then, he had already been suspicious, wondering why his eldest cousin brother would say all this. Only when he returned to Doha and met his grandfather, who then told him personally that in future, his eldest cousin brother's role would be on his shoulders, did he come to a shocked realization. His grandfather had sent him to visit his eldest cousin brother, not for any so-called kinship bonding, but for the purpose of letting his visit be an announcement to his cousin on the Li family's decision. He was the candidate the Li family had selected to replace his eldest cousin brother as inheritor. Li Shi was immediately consumed with regret. Due to his ignorance, his idiocy, his dim-wittedness, he had actually hurt his beloved eldest cousin brother by his own hand. He also hated the Li family's heartlessness. His eldest cousin brother's body was already so weak, and they had still given him such a heavy mental blow at this time. They had never intended for his eldest cousin brother to get better, hoping instead that he would just go ahead and die from the shock for their own ease of mind. Yes, his eldest cousin brother was very intelligent. The moment he had seen him, his cousin had already understood what the Li family had decided. His eldest cousin brother had not reacted with resentment or rage, but had instead done all he could as an elder, giving his younger brother some advice and guidance, entrusting his hopes to him. In his heartache, Li Shi rejoiced that he had left the Li family early on to enter the Scout Academy, thus saved from becoming cold-blooded like the rest of the Li family members. He directly refused his grandfather's arrangement, and said that, since the Li family had given up on his eldest cousin brother, then he would be the one to build his eldest cousin brother's future. The Li family people would no longer be allowed to interfere in his eldest cousin brother's life. As for the matter of the Li family inheritor, since Li Yingji was interested, then they should just let Li Yingji do it. Yes, he disdained the position of Li family inheritor. He did not value this cold-blooded Li family. He had long thought before that when he grew up to become someone strong enough to stand on his own, he would take his eldest cousin brother out of the Li family, the two of them completely cutting ties with this cold-blooded and heartless Li family. 3. His grandfather had not been angered by his words. Instead, he asked him with a sneer, what was he basing his words on? If he became the family head, he might perhaps still be able to give Li Milan a better life. Otherwise, everything was just empty talk. He would not be able to give his cousin anything. Subsequently, his grandfather had listed out the total fees of all the various consultations, medications, and high-grade medicinal agents spent on his eldest cousin brother, all this while to Li Shi. To maintain Li Milan's life, it was impossible without several million credits. If Li Milan had not been a direct descendant of the main branch, so the Li family had borne the costs, he would have long died from illness on planet Azure. The Li family had already done more than enough for Li Milan. Now, they could not let the average Li Milan continue to be the first inheritor, making the Li family the laughingstock of the top elite families. This was the true opinion of a family head. Li Shi had been very disappointed. He had thought that his grandfather had truly loved his eldest cousin brother, only sending him to the distant planet Azure to protect him, distancing him from the cruel struggles within the main camp of the Li family. Reality proved that he had been too idealistic. There was no such thing as kinship and blood relation within the Li family. Profit was the only thing tying parents and siblings together. There was only calculation, and using one another. Perhaps his grandfather had simply not wanted to keep seeing this disgrace of the Li family, thus sending eldest cousin brother so far away for his own peace of mind. Li Shu was sad and indignant, reflexively wanting to fight back with barbed words. But when the words came to his lips, he recalled those words his eldest cousin brother had said to him back at Planet Azure, that he should learn to tolerate. Yes, if he became at odds with his grandfather, and let his parents know his true thoughts, it might end up harming his eldest cousin brother. Li Shu knew very well how ruthless his parents could be with their methods. Once they found out that his eldest cousin brother was the reason why he had refused to be the first inheritor, they might very likely employ dirty means to eliminate the problem. This was not something he wished to see. He did not want his eldest cousin brother to be harmed any further due to him. Thus, Li Shu was silent. He only said that he would return and think about it. His grandfather had looked at him contemplatively, that one glance almost making him think he had been seen through, but his grandfather had not said anything on it. He had only informed him that he still had a year's time to consider, but once he began schooling at the military academy, that would be the final deadline. As he left, his grandfather had also reminded him that he could come discuss things over with him whenever he had the time. The words "discuss things over" were said with a special emphasis. Li Shu understood the hidden meaning behind his grandfather's words. If he agreed to accept the position of first inheritor, his grandfather would be willing to pay some price, such as continuing to pay for Li Milan's medical expenses for a while longer or something. Li Shu thought for a very long time after returning to the Scout Academy. He had also considered his grandfather's suggestion, to become the family head, and then hold up the sky for his eldest cousin brother for allowing him to live securely under his wing. Yet, Li Shu could not fool himself. By the time he truly obtained the rights of family head, it would be 30 to 40 years later at least. While his eldest cousin brother's body did not seem like it could hold out for so long, only by finding the best doctors in the Federation as soon as possible, the best medicine, the best resources, would he have any hope of extending his eldest cousin brother's life. Li Shu did not hope for his eldest cousin brother to die young. Right now, the human lifespan was already infinitely close to 200 years. He wished that his cousin would at least live beyond 150 years. To achieve this goal, he could only find a way to heal his eldest cousin brother as soon as possible. At present, what Li Shu wanted, he did not have, so it was impossible to rely on any outside power. As for the Li family, his grandfather had already spoken. The Li family had already done their duty by his eldest cousin brother. The age of maturity in the Federation was 20. The Li family would only support him till then. After that, they would no longer continue to pay for those massive medical fees of his eldest cousin brother. According to his grandfather's words, since he would be an adult then, he should be fully responsible for himself. This meant that there could only be one path before him. 4 years later, he needed to possess a large amount of credits, enough to replace the Li family's role in supporting his cousin's exorbitant medical fees. However, at that time, he would still only be a cadet, so he would never be able to afford it. Moreover, the Li family would only give Li family descendants the necessary credits for daily living, not a credit more. Before maturity, even if they earned any credits, those credits would be claimed by the Li family accounts. He would not see a single bit of it. For those few days, he was plagued with worry, with no mind at all to bother with anything else around him. Even though the 10th grade had been beaten so soundly by the 7th grade that they did not dare to lift their heads, he had not noticed. Every day, he was thinking about his and his eldest cousin brother's future. Just when he was at his wits' end and was preparing himself to lower his head and negotiate with his grandfather, an application brochure from the military academy illuminated a path for him. The military academy not only had mecha piloting, but countless other specializations as well, and one of them was the military medical research specialization, which was held in very high esteem by the military. Meanwhile, military doctors were definitely the best among the Federation doctors. As such, they had the opportunity to work with medicinal agents that had been secretly formulated by the Federation. In particular, there were certain forbidden medicines that only top-level military doctors could access. Therefore, Instead of begging others for medicinal agents and resources, he might as well become a top-level military doctor himself and earn the right to take those medicines and resources. Li Shi's gaze had sparkled. He had finally found a path by which he could save his eldest cousin brother. Li Shi did not rush. He immediately went home and had a sincere talk with his grandfather. When he had told the other of his decision, he remembered his grandfather asking him if he would ever regret it. Li Shi remembered that he had smiled as he replied, saying that he did not want to become a puppet controlled by power and profit. He was not heartless enough to abandon his own blood brothers. And since that was the case, he would follow his heart. He would not regret it. When he bid farewell to his grandfather, he could vaguely hear his grandfather muttering these words, "Li Milan, what virtues or abilities have you?" 5. Chapter 247, Wager. Right at that moment, a human figure slowly walked onto the stage. That person was about 30 years old and was dressed in the alternating blue-white military uniform of the Federation. He had a handsome face and a stately build. By simply standing on the stage, he drew everyone's eye. "Ah, the referee is here." The person's age and military uniform, which differed from the cadets, clearly marked him as the referee sent by the academy. Heavens! The referee the school sent is actually Colonel Tang Yuan. When an eagle-eyed student noticed who the referee on the stage was, he could not help but yell out in shock. "What? Colonel Tang Yu, that ace instructor who cultivated the Thunder King, the number one in the school?" As the news spread among the students, even those who had not known Colonel Tang Yu before this also began exclaiming in awe. Mind you, Colonel Tang Yu was the strongest among the instructors of mecha piloting. It was rumored that he was already an ace operator. Besides that, in one of the teams he led, which had 6 students in total, the Thunder King was just a half step away from advancing to ace status, while the other 5 in the team had all successfully advanced to special class operator. Undoubtedly, he was the superstar ace instructor of the military academy. Rumor had it that after he was done mentoring this batch of students till their 4th year, he would be able to mentor a new batch of 2nd years starting next year. Perhaps Colonel Tang Yu had willingly taken on the role of referee just so he could take a look at the abilities of this year's intake. After all, these people could be his students of tomorrow. Of course, it was even more likely that he had already begun taking in students, so perhaps this wagered fight was also an assessment of Colonel Tang Yu's for the new cadets? All of the senior students stared enviously at the 5 freshmen standing on the stage. Even if these students were defeated in this fight, as long as they performed decently and caught Colonel Tang Yu's eye, their futures would be immeasurable. It had to be said that this year's freshmen were just too lucky. The mecha instructors of the military academy did not mentor their personal students up till the 6th year, typically only mentoring them till their 3rd year. As the freshmen were focused on their physical conditioning for the 1st year, busy building up the proper foundations, the mecha instructors would only take in students beginning from the 2nd year. After mentoring them to the 4th year, their focused mentorship would end. Since the 5th and 6th year students were basically in the process of prepping for graduation, they typically had 2 options. One was to go join some adventuring groups on some intergalactic adventuring mission to increase their own real-world battle experience. The other was to enter the armed forces directly and begin an internship. Of course, those who chose the second option were all the best the school had to offer, typically already being noticed in their 4th year for their exceptional performance. By their 5th year, the military division which had its eye on them would issue them an internship offer letter and take them away. Of course, those 4th-year students who performed well this year were pretty much all aiming for the newly established 23rd Division, not because they would have more opportunity to shine in a new division, but because the commander of the 23rd Division was one of the 12 God-class operators of the Federation, General Ling Zhao. He was the idol of all the cadets. The Thunder King was rushing so much to advance to Ace Operator this year precisely because he wanted General Ling Zhao to know of his existence. With that, he would have a chance to be noticed by the other and obtain that precious internship offer letter. An internship offer letter did not mean that one would be able to remain at that division at the end of the 2-year internship, but as long as one performed within acceptable standards, one would normally not be dismissed by the division. At this time, seeing the appearance of Colonel Tang Yu, those within the boxes frowned. Anyone with a brain could tell that the Academy's arrangements this time seemed to hint at some deeper intent. Only Yun Ziyu in Li Shi's box continued to fret obliviously, with Colonel Tang Yu as referee. Won't he be biased towards Liting? After all, the Thunder King Qiaoting is his favored disciple. Li Shu instantly rolled his eyes at his friend at these words, having no desire at all to even respond. However, this somewhat moronic question of Yun Ziyu's had pulled him out of his memories. Even though his mood remained solemn and heavy, he was no longer caught up in the past. As a result of these few years of research, Li Shu was increasingly confident that he would be able to take over his eldest cousin brother's medical expenses before his rite of passage to adulthood. These past few years, the research studies Li Shu had participated in had all yielded tremendous results. Besides one forbidden medicine that was restricted for military use, the yields of the other studies could be generalized for public use. As such, to reward him, the Academy had given Li Shu many awards, which included a large sum of credits. Back then, Li Shu had already told his instructors of his personal situation back home, so these credits were currently stored within the accounts of those instructors. Of course, the greatest profit was not the school's reward, but the sale of his patent rights. After learning of Li Shu's situation, during the forging of the contract with the manufacturer, his instructor had specially requested for the main researcher Li Shu to not be directly reimbursed with credits, instead asking for company shares of equivalent value. The interest gained from those shares every year was clearly stipulated to be transferred into Li Shu's account once he became an adult. Li Shu was overjoyed by this outcome. He was filled with gratitude towards that instructor. This would undoubtedly give him a long-term steady source of income, helping him eliminate future worries. Seeing Li Shu's face recover from its pained expression, Yun Ziyu let out an internal sigh of relief. He had not expected that his thoughtless question on why Li Shu had changed his mind to study military medicine would cause his good friend so much pain. His twisted expression had let Yun Ziyu know without words that Li Shu must have encountered some painful event back then. Yun Ziyu could not help but regret his rashness and try to do something to fix things. When he saw Colonel Tang Yu step onto the stage, an idea sparked and he had immediately blurted an extremely stupid question to draw Li Shu's attention. Now, it looked like his ploy had been quite effective. Li Shu had really returned from his memories, and his expression was now much more natural. As a cadet, Yun Ziyu naturally knew that all the instructors of the military academy were righteous military men. They would never do such an obviously biased thing, and Colonel Tang Yu, who was especially widely lauded for being upstanding, was even more unlikely to do such a thing. Within the Wuji box too, seeing Colonel Tang Yu step onto the stage, Li Lang and the others also made sounds of shock and surprise. Who would have expected this great god to appear on such a small arena stage? Li Lang's hand, which was holding his drink, jerked. He could not help but look towards the 5 representatives of the new cadet regiment, a trace of pensiveness in his gaze. Among these people of the new cadet regiment, which one was it that had such formidable backing, able to affect the typical style of the military academy? Even the top elite family, the Li family, did not have the capability. Even if the Li family could influence the decision of the president of the Federation, they would not be able to budge the Federation military. And since the military academy was part of the military system, even the president would not be able to order the military academy around. A small smile appeared on Li Lang's lips as he thought, how interesting. Looks like this fight of Ltings won't be as easy as they thought. The moment Colonel Tang Yu was on the stage, he coughed loudly, and the initial furor caused by the colonel's appearance instantly died down. Colonel Tang Yu smiled faintly and then said, "Today, I will be the referee for this fight between the new cadet regiment and Lting. I will judge fairly according to the rules. If there is any dissatisfaction with the results, or any complaints on my decisions as referee, you may request an arbitration with the arbitration committee of the academy." That said, Tang Yu glanced at the 5 representatives of both sides. Seeing the steady expressions on both sides, he nodded slightly. approving at the quality of the representatives chosen. He continued to say, "This fight is best 3 of 5, to be fought by 5 representatives from each side. To ensure fairness, the 5 participating representatives are not announced beforehand. 1 minute before the fight begins, the leader of each team is to submit the name list 3 of the representatives participating in the fight to me. Remember, once the name list is in my hands, no more changes are allowed, or else the side which makes any changes will be immediately considered to forfeit." Seeing both sides nod in understanding, Tang Yu continued, "One more thing, there is a wager on this fight as agreed by both sides. Before the fighting begins, the wager needs to be stated clearly. The school rules dictate that the contents of the wager shall not go against anything expressly forbidden by the military academy." At this point of his speech, Tang Yu paused, his cold gaze slashing like a knife across the faction members of both sides seated on the spectating platform, causing those people to feel a shiver in their hearts. Those students who were slightly weaker actually felt cold sweat break out all over their bodies. "As Lting is the challenger, please enter your wager into the military academy mainframe." Tang Yu indicated for the Lting Mecha clan to submit their wager into the mainframe. Very quickly, on the large screen behind the arena stage, the contents of the wager was displayed. It was very simple, only one sentence. The contents of the wager read, "If Lting wins, all members of the new cadet regiment shall collectively join Lting." The appearance of this wager made all the spectators break out into a commotion once more. Even the audience within the boxes could no longer keep their composure, overwhelmed with surprise. Why this wager? Isn't Lting very particular about the quality of their members? Why do they want to take the entire group? Could it be that there's some secret about the new cadet regiment that we do not know? All the leading people of the various factions began to cry out. They could not believe what they were seeing. They had initially believed that Lting would request for the new cadet regiment to disband, and then aim to absorb a portion of the more talented new cadets into Lting. They would then be able to take advantage of the chaos while the members of the new cadet regiment were still filled with anger and hate at Lting to snatch away a portion of the talented new cadets. However, this wager of Lting's threw all their ideal calculations out of the window. Lting's method of taking the whole pot for themselves without sharing a single errant drop made them extremely dissatisfied. In the Wuji box, Hanyu and the others were similarly shocked beyond belief. He and Wei Ji shared baffled glances, the confusion evident on their faces. They reflexively looked towards Li Lan, hoping he would be able to give them an answer. Although they were extremely apprehensive of Li Lan, they still believed fully in Li Lan's analytical abilities. Many times when they were unable to figure things out, Li Lan could strike right at the heart of the matter. For Li Lan met their gazes and opened his mouth to say, "I too do not know why Lting would do this, but I'm certain that the new cadet regiment must have something that Lting values." Hanyu and Wei Ji nodded. They knew enough to figure this out for themselves. In the previous period of time, the major factions were all working on deciphering the data of the entrance evaluations of the new cadets. "I wonder if Lting has obtained that info." Li Lan did not draw things out, plainly stating his thoughts to the two. It was not that Li Lan did not want to keep things to himself, but he knew that, even if he said nothing, Hanyu and Wei Ji would still have been able to think of this after a few days at the latest. In that case, he might as well be frank, to better give the other two the impression that he really had nothing to hide from the two of them. Moreover, the most important secret was still in his hands. This little bit of trivial news, Li Lan truly did not consider it anything of real worth. Chapter 248, Luolang Fights. Could it be that the results of this batch of students are all pretty good? Even if there are some who are a bit weaker, in order not to waste anything, they decided to take in everyone, mused Hanyu, following the logical flow of Li Lan's comment. Wei Ji said in agreement, "This new cadet regiment is from Doha, with most of the students from Doha's Central Scout Academy. Their abilities won't be too far off the mark. Taking all of them in, Lting would not lose anything. But I suspect this matter will not be that simple. Could it be some scheme of Lting's? His objective may not be the entire new cadet regiment, but a particular person within the new cadet regiment. However, in consideration that that person may be proud and unruly, he decided he might as well take in the whole lot. Wei Ji raised another possibility. That aberrant Zhang Jing'an mentioned, exclaimed Han Yu, as if coming to some realization, his eyes shining. That aberrant, who Zhang Jing'an was afraid of, would most certainly not be someone easy to bring to heel. Perhaps Lting was afraid that if they targeted him alone, the aberrant might not have any reservations, thus ending up like that fourth-year genius mecha modifier, stubborn to the end, still unwilling to submit even now. Perhaps after that experience, Lting had chosen to change their methods. By taking in the entire group, that aberrant would have no choice but to consider his companions beside him, and thus lower his head and submit. A feint, certainly a great strategy, sighed Han Yu, a trace of admiration in his gaze. Even if Qiao Ting isn't around, the Vice Regiment Commander Lin Zidong is not someone to cross. A faction could not last for long by relying on one person's strength alone. Lting had been able to remain as the top faction in the military academy for so many consecutive years due to the exceptional Vice Regiment commanders it had, especially the advisor Lin Zidong. Although this first Vice Regiment commander was not from the strategy specialization, he was no less capable than those of the specialization. Li Lan did not refute the two suppositions, merely nodding in agreement as he smiled softly. However, the gazes of the four were then drawn once more by the stage, for the representative of the new cadet regiment had emerged. It was the public regiment commander Wu Jian. He had been the one to step up and accept the wager with Lting, as well as raise their own conditions for the wager. If by any chance the Lting Mecha clan lost, then they would have to be responsible for the safety of the new cadet regiment for the next 2 years. This meant that, in those 2 years' time, if some other faction challenged the new cadet regiment, all the fights would be the Lting Mecha clan's responsibility. This wager would in fact indirectly make the entire Lting Mecha clan into the fighters and protectors of the new cadet regiment, but in comparison with Lting's wager, the new cadet regiment's wager was not that unreasonable. Since Lting wanted to consume the entire new cadet regiment, the new cadet regiment naturally could also request Lting to become their helpers. Besides, the new cadet regiment did not have ill intentions, they only stated a period of 2 years, leaving Lting no way to refuse. As expected, the vice regiment commanders of Lting very quickly agreed to the terms after a brief discussion. After all, Lting too did not want the other factions to covet the promising new cadet regiment. If Lting lost by any chance, this would ensure the cadets would not be taken in by any other faction in the upcoming 2 years, and 2 years later, Lting would have another chance to consume the new cadet regiment. Therefore, this wager had no downsides from Lting's perspective. When Colonel Tang Yu declared that the wager was established, the upper ranks of all the factions could not help but sigh. With this, even if the new cadet regiment won by a fluke, they could do nothing within the next 2 years. No matter how tempting the regiment was, they could only watch without doing anything, because they still did not have the guts to go up against the Lting Mecha clan. At this time, they could not help but exclaim in admiration at the strategic thinking of the new cadet regiment, coming up with a wager that Lting could not refuse. Whether they won or lost, the new cadet regiment would still obtain the protection of the large tree of Lting. It was all just a matter of duration. After the wager was agreed upon, all the representatives of the Lting Mecha clan and the new cadet regiment walked off the stage, to await the start of the first match. Colonel Tang Yu had already mentioned the rules of the fight. For each match, both sides would have 5 minutes time to arrange things. Within those 5 minutes, each side must decide the candidate for their team. If they did not submit a name within the given time, the referee would give the victory to the opposing side. Walking off the stage, Ling Lan looked pensively at the people on Lting's side. Earlier on the stage, she had secretly evaluated those people's skill level, and had a rough idea of their capabilities in her mind. However, other than herself who could beat anyone handily, it would be a little risky for Qilong and the others. Ling Lan furrowed her brow slightly, beginning to consider the order they would use for the arena fights. This time, Ling Lan had chosen Qilong, Wu Jian, Luo Lang, Li Yingji, and herself to be the fighting representatives. Originally, she had wanted to see how the opponent would send out their candidates before making her final arrangements. However, Colonel Tang Yu's speech threw her plans out. Concealing the name list before announcing it at the final moment made Ling Lan lose all direction. "Boss, have you forgotten that you still have me?" Just when Ling Lan was fretting, Little Four began making a ruckus moodily inside the mind space. Of course he was moody. Why did Boss always forget his existence during these critical moments? It should be known that he was the best cheating device. Fi. What was that random thought just now? I, Little Four, am a youth of 5 virtues. 1. I would never do such a tasteless thing as cheating, said Little Four, happily justifying his own actions and twisting words. We are fighting a great battle of information. Taking the initiative by procuring information on the opponent is the bedrock of success. All of this is just the means in service to this ultimate end. History shall be written by the victors. Little Four had recently become addicted to military stories. Who knew where he had stolen this particular block of text from? Little Four was still throwing words around to extol the virtues of his behavior, while Ling Lan's eyes had lit up at Little Four's timely interruption. That's right. How had she forgotten that Little Four was a god of the virtual world? If she wanted to know the name list the opponent had set, wasn't it just a simple matter? Her only hope was that the opponent would not choose to key in their selection at the last second. Otherwise, even if Little Four could obtain the information, she still would not have the time to enter her own selection. Little Four had finally re-established his own self-image, soothing his soul, and he immediately sensed Ling Lan's concerns. In response, he said disdainfully, "With me, Little Four, around, would you still need to enter it manually? You only need to think of the name in your head, and I, Little Four, will be able to instantaneously send it over." Such a simple matter. Why did his boss have to worry so much? Wasn't this just making light of his, Little Four's, abilities? Little Four could not help but pout in silent protest of Ling Lan's lack of faith in him. Seeing this demeanor of Little Four's, Ling Lan's heart settled. In a great mood, she kneaded Little Four's face inside the mind space, laughing loudly as she said, "Good, Little Four, I leave this matter to you." Only within the mind space would Ling Lan laugh so unreservedly. The smile behind the laugh made Little Four lose focus. Boo-hoo-hoo, why did the charm of Boss's smile seem to have increased limitlessly once more? Thinking of this, Little Four once again reaffirmed that it was safer for Boss to remain slack-faced. Otherwise, even though he was a god in the virtual world, he would be reduced to a puddle of goo by his boss's smile. Little Four abruptly recalled that he seemed to have very low resistance against Daddy Ling Zhao's smile too. Could it be that smiles were his fatal weakness? At this thought, Little Four suddenly felt a sense of danger invade his heart. This was because he remembered that intelligent bio-entities could not be found to have any obvious weaknesses, otherwise they would be recalled for repurposing. Little Four shiftily looked around, and finding no other intelligent bio-entities in the area, only then did he relax. He pounded his chest. Luckily he was not in the Mandora star system right now, so no other intelligent bio-entity had observed his abnormality. Little Four had barely settled from his fright when Ling Lan came up with another question. Even though she may know the skill levels of those people, she had no way to match the person to the name on the opponent's name list. Little Four became absorbed by Ling Lan's question instantly, forgetting his earlier fright. When he figured out what his boss was worried about this time, he could not help but roll his eyes contemptuously at his boss. Damn it, and he had thought what kind of difficult problem his boss had now. It turned out to be such a small matter. Very swiftly, the name datasheets of Vilting representatives appeared in Ling Lan's mind space, along with a 3D rendition of their appearance. Ling Lan quickly matched the people to their names. Now, the moment the opponent entered the names, Ling Lan would be able to tell which level their physical skills were at, and make the appropriate counter. With this, Ling Lan's mind was greatly eased. Ling Lan was prepared once more to mimic Danji's horse racing, sending out the fighters on her side strategically according to the strength level of the opponent. As long as they won 3 matches in the end, the new cadet regiment would have the right to their own freedom. "Boss, The opponent's name list is out," Little Four yelled out in the mind space, and then the opponent's fighting order and corresponding image were displayed in Linglan's mind space. "Damn it. Actually starting off with the third strongest. Looks like the opponent is also guarding against this strategy of mine, actively working to win this competition." Linglan could not help but frown as she read over the other's name list. The opponent had indeed dealt a good hand. Linglan turned to look at her companions beside her, and her gaze finally landed on Luo Lang. "Luo Lang, get ready to fight." "Yes, boss." Luo Lang's pretty face lighted up. He had not expected boss to send him up for the very first match. Meanwhile, seeing that Linglan had chosen Luo Lang, without waiting for her to give the order, Little Four instantly sent Luo Lang's name to the referee Tang Yu. Observing Luo Lang's excited expression, Linglan had no choice but to be a wet blanket and calm him down a little. With a stern expression, she said, "The opponent is a master at the peak of early stage Qi Jin. While you have just entered Qi Jin, the Qi Jin in your body has not settled yet, and so is unsuitable for a hard confrontation. Draw things out to start, and then figure something out after you've gotten used to the pace." Linglan had chosen Luo Lang because Luo Lang currently needed a tough fight to help him stabilize his realm of first-level early-stage Qi Jin. This was also why Linglan had not gone up first to just win the match. Even as she ensured the final victory would be theirs, Linglan hoped for her companions to improve through the fights. Linglan knew her arrangement might cause Luo Lang to suffer a tough fight, perhaps even being beaten very badly. However, for the sake of her companion's growth, she needed to harden her heart. Sometimes, losing was not a disgrace, but a type of progress. "Understood, boss." Luo Lang nodded his pretty head seriously, showing that he had heard her advice. Right at this moment, the 5 minutes ran out. Colonel Tang Yu shouted from the stage, "Lting Mecha Clan vs New Cadet Regiment, first round matchup. 5th year Qi against 1st year Luo Lang." Chapter 249, still a little ways off. Luo Lang took in a deep breath. Although he knew the opponent was stronger than him, Luo Lang did not want to give up just like that. He wanted to help boss out. Even if he knew it would be very difficult to achieve the outcome he wanted, he still wanted to try. When Luo Lang walked onto the stage, a commotion broke out among the people watching below. "What's this? The new cadet regiment is actually sending out such a skinny weakling? Could it be the new cadet regiment is prepared to throw this match? Look, is that fellow really a guy? He looks even prettier than a girl." Who knows who yelled this out, causing the crowd's attention to swiftly turn away from Luo Lang's thin and slender frame to his lovely face. "FCK, it can't be a girl dressed up as a guy, right?" Some random lecher was in raptures at the sight, beginning to indulge in wild fantasy. Of course, his fanciful delusions received the contempt of the students beside him. Did he really think this was those olden times, able to impersonate a man just by putting on some guy clothes? Upon entrance to the military academy, the first thing they had to go through was a physical checkup that had been conducted before everyone else, where they had all been naked. Well, alright, the examining teachers were very reasonable, and would allow you to use your hands to cover your willy. Of course, these scornful cadets looking disdainfully at that lecher would never ever imagine that there truly was someone who had blatantly enrolled into the first men's military academy as a girl to study. During that physical checkup, this person had naturally been exempted via special privilege by a particular national idol general who loved his daughter deeply. In one of the boxes on the second floor, Luo Lang's beautiful face and his delicate and seemingly easy-to-overpower figure made a person's eyes shine. A covetous smile grew on that person's lips as he mumbled to himself, who could have expected that there would be such a stunner among this year's freshmen? He licked his lips, deciding that he would obtain the other by any means necessary. Lting's candidate, Chia, was a 5th-year cadet, currently still at the academy for his last few courses. As his physical skills compatibility was extremely outstanding, in order to ensure victory, Lin Zidong had personally invited him to represent them. Sending Chia out as vanguard was a calculated move on Lin Zidong's part. Linglan was not the only one who had thought of Danji's horse racing. Lin Zidong too had thought of the same principle. He was afraid that the new cadet regiment would send out their third strongest to fight against the weakest in his party, catching him off guard and thus causing Lting to lose the first match. Lin Zidong knew well that the first match was key. Morale would lean towards the side who won. Lin Zidong did not want to let the new cadet regiment obtain that advantage, and so had chosen the third strongest in Lting's party, Chia, to fight first, guaranteeing the final outcome. Lin Zidong's thought process was, even if the opponent planned to fight in the order of their strength levels, he would not lose out by sending out the third strongest now. As long as they won this match, he would still have the two strongest at hand. No matter what, victory would be theirs. Although Lin Zidong was somewhat wary of that mysterious aberrant, he still had more faith in those two strongest combatants below the Thunder King. Chia saw how delicate his opponent was, just like a girl, and was instantly filled with displeasure. The gaze he directed at Luo Lang carried a clear trace of contempt. Instead of becoming angered by the opponent's attitude, Luo Lang was pleased. The more the opponent looked down on him, the better his chances to achieve an upset. Of course, Luo Lang had not forgotten Ling Lan's earlier instructions, so, the moment he got onto the stage, even though Colonel Tang Yu had not given the signal to start, Luo Lang's entire body was keyed up in readiness. Despite looking no different from his usual standing posture, anyone with a keen eye would be able to tell from his low-hanging arms and slightly bent waist that Luo Lang would be able to unleash his strength in an explosive burst to handle any sudden shifts in the situation. Colonel Tang Yu was an ace mecha operator, but he was also a combat expert. Otherwise, the Academy would not have sent him to be the referee of this fight. Seeing Luo Lang's stance, a gleam of light no one else could see flashed through his eyes. However, when he glanced towards Chia, his brow creased almost imperceptibly. Tang Yu raised his right hand expressionlessly, and with a sharp wave, he shouted, "Begin." Luo Lang had initially thought to stay on the defensive, drawing out the fight with the other for a bit. Unexpectedly, the opponent did not put up any defense at all. He stood sluggishly, his entire person slouched and seemingly unprepared. Seeing this, a thought sparked through Luo Lang's mind, and with a spring off his right foot, his entire body pounced from one side of the stage to the other like a cannonball, striking hard and fast towards the opponent. Seeing this attack of Luo Lang's, Tang Yu's eyebrows rose slightly, somewhat surprised. He had determined that Luo Lang's original stance had been largely defensive. However, Luo Lang had been able to switch from that stance instantly into offense. Moreover, he had done so without any interruption in his movements, the transition smooth and flawless. It was clear to see that Luo Lang's control over his muscles had reached an extremely high realm. Even though Luo Lang's body may lean towards the delicate side, not as buff, and with slightly weaker resilience compared to the average boy, this control over his muscles allowed him to compensate for his body's weakness. It could be said that Luo Lang had already developed a combat style appropriate for his body type. This was most definitely a youth who possessed extremely great talent in combat. Right then, Tang Yu could not help but be pleased by this discovery of talent. This type of ability would undoubtedly be a great help to mecha piloting. As long as Luo Lang's physical condition could pass the first year's evaluation, Tang Yu believed he would be unable to refrain from taking in such a talented student. Luo Lang's attack was undoubtedly sudden. The unprepared Chia took fright, but he was after all a fifth year. In terms of combat, he was very experienced. He would not become flustered like those newbies, choosing to lash out thoughtlessly in his panic. Instead, he retreated calmly and rapidly, trying to put some distance between him and his opponent so he would have enough space to gather his strength and counterattack. Although Luo Lang was a first-year military academy cadet, his battle experience was not weak either. Mind you, his companion Qilong was a battle maniac, dragging his friends off to spar whenever he had the time. Luo Lang was undoubtedly the one who had been dragged off the most too, though Ziyi had joined in after that. The frequency still had not dropped by much. The natural result of all this fighting was a wealth of experience. Luo Lang saw his opponent retreating and instantly knew what the other was plotting. Having the initiative, How could he let go of this advantage? Thus, on the arena stage, two figures could be seen dancing around the stage, one in constant close pursuit of the other. Due to the extremely high speed, the spectating students actually saw the action as a streak of shadow moving across the stage. Watching this scene, Lin Zidong could not help but harumph and say, "I was surprisingly right." The opponent really had been planning to use the principle of Danji's horse racing. Luckily I had taken measures to counter this, or else the opponent might really have taken the first match. If he had sent out the weakest in his team, whose skills were not much stronger than the other, at that time, it would have been hard to determine for certain which side would win. But now, victory was sure to be theirs. Although Lin Zidong's combat ability was not that strong, he firmly believed that with Chiya's strength, he would never lose to a first-year freshman. On the stage, Chiya saw that no matter how hard he tried to retreat, the other was sticking like sticky candy to him. He could not pull away no matter what. He felt that this performance of his was really too disgraceful, and rage surged in his heart. He began to hate Luo Lang, who he had initially looked down upon. He would definitely teach this detestable fellow before him a brutal lesson. Even though he was currently at a total disadvantage, with his capabilities, he would still be able to defeat the other. Having full confidence in himself, Chiya did not want to retreat any longer. He abruptly halted his steps, and with a loud bellow, the Qi-Jin in his body gathered rapidly to surge into his right hand, where he then thrust out his right palm in a fierce strike towards Luo Lang. "All right," shouted Luo Lang, seeing the other stop running and choosing instead to circulate his chi to fight him head-on. His long ready right fist punched out powerfully at the opponent. This move of Luo Lang seemed to go against Ling Lan's instructions at the start, but Luo Lang did not think he was doing anything wrong. He had managed to take the initiative and take control of the flow of the fight from the start due to the opponent's underestimation of him. Plus, the other had attacked from an emergency stop, so the power he could put into his blow would definitely not be as substantial as his own. Thus, Luo Lang felt that even if he met this blow of the opponent's head-on, he would not lose, and may even have an overwhelming advantage. And so, a fist and a palm crashed into each other, sending a muffled whomp ringing out across the stage. With Luo Lang and Chiya at its center, a powerful swirl of wind swept out over the surrounding audience. However, there were Qi-Jin absorbing facilities around the edges of the stage, hence the students sitting below could not feel any of this invisible force. Still, even so, everyone knew that this strike was certainly not as simple or casual as it appeared to be. The two fighters were frozen in place for several seconds, 3 perhaps, or maybe just 1, and then the two of them were abruptly sent flying back from their stalled state. Luo Lang had been on top to begin with, so when he was sent flying, he immediately flipped into a somersault to dissipate the rest of the force, and then landed soundly on the ground. Meanwhile, Chiya retreated a whole 3 steps before finding stable footing again, though his face flushed deeply. His complexion quickly returned to normal, but from the perspective of those keen of eye, Chiya most likely lost out by a hair in this collision. The spectating students looked at one another. They had not expected what they believed would be a one-sided fight to be such a close fight. Instead, it was to the extent that in that last strike, the first-year Luo Lang had vaguely gained the upper hand, while the fifth-year Chiya seemed to have lost out in comparison. Some new cadets became exhilarated watching the proceedings, even though they had hoped in their hearts that the new cadets would be able to achieve something in the fights. Upholding their pride, they knew reality would not be that easy. Furthermore, Luo Lang had seemed unbelievably scrawny, making them lose all hope from the start. Who could have expected that that youth who was as pretty as a picture on the stage could actually fight so well, going at it so fiercely from the beginning, and then even suppressing the opponent in this last encounter? Could it be that the new cadet regiment's arrogance in accepting the wagered fight was not purely out of stubborn pride, but because they truly had the strength to back them up? Tentative hope rose in these new cadets' hearts. If the new cadet regiment really won, they, as freshmen, would undoubtedly have a better refuge. Compared to those pre-existing factions, The new cadet regiment, which was made up of freshmen like them, was certainly much more acceptable in their minds. Thus thought the spectating students, and even on Lting's side, quite a few faces had shifted slightly. After all, Chia was their third strongest fighter. If he lost, the situation would not look good for Lting. Seeing the disquiet of his companions, one of the strongest fighters in Lting quietly explained some things to the people around him. Consequently, those people relaxed and began to smile in relief. Luo Lang is still a little ways off. 3. Ling Lan sighed as she shook her head lightly. Chapter 250. Innate talent activated. Luo Lang may have had the upper hand for the entire fight so far, but the difference in their skill levels made this blow of Luo Lang's utterly ineffective. In contrast, although the opponent may appear to have taken a blow, Luo Lang's stride was broken, causing the two fighters to once again return to the equal ground they were in at the start. Ling Lan could see that Luo Lang himself, within the fight, had came to understand that his advantage had been lost after that strike, which was why he had not chosen to press his attack. Instead, he cautiously chose to defend, and the two fighters once again faced each other in a standoff. Standing to one side, Tang Yu saw Luo Lang's actions and nodded silently. This first-year student did not become reckless and overconfident due to his advantageous position at the start. He could clearly sense the change in the flow of the situation, quickly shifting to defense when he saw his advantage disappear. It was clear to see that he was level-headed and rational. He was definitely a good seedling to be a mecha warrior. The more Tang Yu observed Luo Lang, the more he liked him. Right now, the only thing holding Luo Lang back from becoming an excellent mecha operator was his scrawny frame. Tang Yu could not help but wonder whether he should go to his old friend who specialized in medicine, and take several tubes of their newly developed Gene Agent S modification. He had heard that its effects were even better than the special class gene agents. As the referee, Tang Yu's thoughts went off on a tangent. Chia, who was across from Luo Lang, had rallied himself mentally to attack despite looking as insouciant as before. If Luo Lang impulsively chose to attack again by force, he might very well get an opportunity to injure him in one blow. Unfortunately, Luo Lang was extremely cautious. He did not act like Chia expected. Chia could not help but curse internally, frustrated at the overly cautious nature of this first-year cadet. Luo Lang's manner and actions let Chia know that waiting for Luo Lang to attack first would be fruitless. There were only two paths before Chia: battle Luo Lang in patience, where the one who lost patience first would attack, or Chia himself could launch an attack now. Of these two paths, Chia almost unhesitatingly chose the second. This was because he did not want to continue dragging things out with Luo Lang, believing that this way of fighting was an insult to his skills. He believed that finishing off the other cleanly with a KO would reflect his true capabilities better, truly highlighting the dominance of Lting. Of course, choosing to initiate the attack was also because that previous clash had given him a clear understanding of the true level of Luo Lang's physical skills. In comparison to him, Luo Lang was obviously much weaker. He should have just entered the early stage of Qi Jin. For Chia, who exceeded his opponent by 3 minor levels, defeating the other should be a sure thing. Qi Jin stage was unlike the stages before it, where the difference between every small level was not that significant, so an upset in those stages was indeed possible. However, at Qi Jin stage, just the difference of one small level would be enough to completely overpower an opponent. With this understanding as his support, Qi leapt forward fearlessly, coming right up to Luo Lang in the blink of an eye. A powerful right fist flew at Luo Lang. Luo Lang saw Chia's attack and heard the sound it made as it cut through the air, and knew that he could not take this attack by force. At this moment, his thin and lanky body displayed a completely different combat style from that of someone with a stouter body. Luo Lang deftly shifted a step, lightly twisting his waist to one side, and the opponent's fist sailed by the left side of his body. This distance was controlled skillfully, almost calculating the other's attack range with pinpoint precision, resulting in the punch missing him by the barest of distances. Of course, the only thing Luo Lang could not control was that when he had avoided the punch, several strands of hair had not been able to swing away in time, and had actually been sliced off by the power of the wind force behind the punch. They reluctantly bid farewell to their owner, drifting away wistfully in the air. A loud boom. Chia's punch was heavy, forceful and unstoppable. It crashed into the floor of the stage, emitting a loud sound. The floor of the stage actually began to crack due to this great force, the cracks spreading out like a web to the outer edges of the stage. Meanwhile, at the point where the fist had landed, a shallow ditch of about 30 centimeters had appeared. Taking advantage of the lull, before the opponent could make another move, Luo Leng dashed to the other side of the stage with a quick spring of his feet, once again pulling away from Chia. However, his expression was much more solemn than it had been before. Because he had sensed the power of the opponent's fists at close range, he knew even better now that if he were to be hit accidentally, his body would definitely be unable to take it. He would instantly be injured severely and be forced to withdraw. This was the difference between levels in Qi Jin. Although the levels did not seem to be that far apart, the disparity in vigor and richness of one's Qi Jin was like heaven and earth. The damage to the stage made the freshmen spectating below the stage cry out in shock. Was the match about to be stopped here? One strike had caused the stage to be damaged to this degree. How many more blows would this stage be able to take? The older cadets saw the restlessness of the new cadets, and could not help but sweep disdainful glances at them. At that moment, they had forgotten how they had reacted the exact same way to a similar scene back when they themselves were younger. Not only were the spectating freshmen stunned, even Qilong and the others were astounded by this development. They had not imagined the arena stage of the combat hall of the military academy to be so fragile, actually unable to withstand one blow from an early stage peak-level Qi Jin. Li Yingji was still relatively unbothered, but Wu Jiang and Qilong began musing to themselves, wondering whether they should hold back some of their strength when it was their turn to prevent the entire stage from crumbling. Ling Lan saw the stupefied expressions of her companions, and sighed internally. She spoke up to explain, "This is highly advanced simulation technology, able to physically display the strength of a candidate on the stage. Everything will return to normal after 30 seconds." She had barely finished speaking when the cracks on the stage began to slowly knit back together, becoming whole again in the end. This scene made the new cadets exclaim in wonder once more. Who knew the military academy had actually combined simulation technology with the arena stage, allowing a fighter's strength and power to be manifested in this way, providing such visceral stimulus for the spectators. Seeing this, Qilong, Wu Jian, and the others turned their heads to look admiringly at Ling Lan, silently thinking, "Boss sure enough is boss. So knowledgeable. Nothing can escape his eyes." Ling Lan accepted the idolization of her companions with a placid face, but internally, she was sweat-dropping. Luckily Little Four had given her a heads-up in time, otherwise she too would have been one of the clueless horde. Of course, Ling Lan was also grateful for her ice cube face, unmoving as a rock mountain. It had prevented this fact from being exposed, allowing her to maintain her grand image in her companions' hearts. Even as Ling Lan was interacting with her group, the fight on the stage continued. Chia tenaciously launched attack after attack at Luo Leng, but they were all dodged by the other. At this moment, Luo Leng was steadfastly obeying Boss Ling Lan's instructions. He did not meet the opponent with force, choosing to weave and dodge and drag things out. Just like this, several exchanges went by. One side erratic like the wind, the other a centered well of power. One light, one heavy, they twisted and turned around the stage, leaving the audience gaping. The one-sided fight they had imagined at the start had never occurred. This fighting style of Luo Leng's would be able to sustain him for very long before he tired. There began to be some unrest on Lting's side. Some of the other fighting representatives had expressions of annoyance on their faces, thinking that Chia was performing very shamefully, losing the faces of them seniors. Chia naturally knew about the commotion below the stage. He was angry and frustrated, but he had no good way of dealing with Luo Leng, whose speed was clearly faster than his. The skinny Luo Leng's agility was obviously better than that of the average person. To catch hold of the other, either he had to tire the opponent out, or he had had to make him lose his cool. Seeing the easy way the other was breathing, Chia knew Luo Lang's energy level was very sufficient. In fact, Chia suspected that this irritable flea would still be jumping around even after he himself ran out of energy. Moreover, Chia had no intentions of waiting any further. He wanted to defeat the other quickly to defend his honor. In that case, he could only make the other lose his composure. An evil grin turned up the corners of Chia's lips. As he brushed Bao Wolang again, he mocked, "You trash who only knows how to dodge. Did you use your body to trade for the right to be a candidate for this fight?" Luo Lang's pretty face flushed red as he dodged once more. He controlled the fires of rage in his heart. He knew the other was only saying this to rile him and make him lose his cool. He must not fall for it. Chia advanced once more, his two fists attacking in an endless stream. Luo Lang weaved left and right, narrowly avoiding getting hit several times by the cutting winds of the opponent's punches. Still, even so, several gashes appeared on Luo Lang's uniform, revealing his exquisite ivory skin. As expected, "You really have excellent attributes. No wonder your regiment commander was beguiled by you, promoting you without concern for anything else." Chia swept a suggestive glance at the revealed skin. "Shut up!" Luo Lang screamed. He could tolerate an insult to himself, but he would not allow anyone to insult his boss Lan. "Shut up? Why should I? If he can do it, then he should not be afraid of others." Speaking of it, from Luo Lang's reaction, Chia could tell what Luo Lang's weakness was. He laughed even more wildly as he said, "I want to tell everyone that your regiment commander is gay, that is, a brokeback one." Luo Lang's face flushed crimson, his eyes beginning to turn bloodshot in his anger. He continued to dodge, but his body began shaking uncontrollably. "Ha ha, I've hit the nail on the head, right?" Chia added venomously, and then his long-prepared right leg whipped out in a side kick. Everyone thought Luo Lang would dodge when, right at that moment, Luo Lang suddenly froze, his head bowed. Just as Chia's savage side kick was about to strike Luo Lang's body, Luo Lang's left hand reached out and actually grabbed hold of Chia's right ankle. The spectating Qilong abruptly stood up, his face paling as he said, "Not good." This sudden action made Wu Jiang and Li Yingji look over in bafflement, but the exclamations of the rest of the audience quickly pulled their attention back to the stage. They assumed Qilong had reacted that way due to his concern for his companion. Only Ling Lan knew what that was about. She tugged at Qilong and warned him quietly, "Keep it down." Realizing where he was at, Qilong quickly sat down again, but his complexion remained pale and wan. He leaned towards Ling Lan's ear and said softly, "Boss." Luo Lang activated his innate talent. He had not expected Luo Lang to throw caution to the wind and activate his innate talent on the stage. What in the world had the opponent said to anger him so? Although Chia had spoken very softly, so the spectators had not been able to make out what was said, from the constant movement of his lips and Luo Lang's increasingly troubled expression, it was certain that he had said something which had provoked Luo Lang. Otherwise, Luo Lang would not have disobeyed Ling Lan's orders and choose to activate his innate talent. Ling Lan replied levelly, "I know." With that statement, Ling Lan's aura became unbelievably cold and forbidding, with even a trace of killing intent seeping out. Fortunately, this air of Ling Lan's came and went in the blink of an eye. So other than the few people near her, no one else sensed anything. On the stage, Tang Yu cast a dubious glance in her direction, but he quickly turned back in bewilderment to the fight on the arena stage. Chapter 251, The Fourth Form of One-Inch Punch. Qilong sensed the shift in Ling Lan's aura, and could not help but worry for Luo Lang. Could it be that boss had truly become furious because of Luo Lang's disobedience? Right then, Ling Lan asked Qilong in a low voice, "Can you tell what personality he managed to activate?" Ling Lan hoped the personality Luo Lang activated was not one which was brutal, bloodthirsty, and uncontrollable. Otherwise, she would have to forfeit to protect Luo Lang. The military academy would never permit an uncontrollable loose cannon who could not differentiate friend from foe to continue studying at the school and eventually enter an army division. Qilong peered closely at Luo Lang and then shook his head. puzzled. Strange. This personality has never appeared before. I cannot sense any intense malicious intent, but my innate talent is warning me that I must be careful. Ling Lan frowned at his words. She carefully studied Luo Lang's expression. There was no sign of bloodthirst, nor was there any sort of extreme ruthlessness. The current Luo Lang just seemed endlessly cold, but this coldness did not encompass everyone, merely directed solely at his opponent. Weighing things in her mind, Ling Lan decided and said, "Let's continue watching." Ling Lan too wanted to know what personality this was that Luo Lang had activated. As long as Luo Lang did not lose control, Ling Lan did not want to cut the match short. This was because she knew that, since Luo Lang had thrown caution to the wind to activate his innate talent, he must really not want to lose to this opponent who had insulted him. As their boss, Ling Lan wanted to help Luo Lang achieve what he wanted to do. Seated beside them, Wu Jiang and Li Yingji did not know the struggles of Qilong and Ling Lan. Right now, their attention was fully absorbed by the stage. They had even stood up in their excitement, as Luo Lang had currently taken full control of the scene. With one hand, Luo Lang gripped Chia's ankle. All the spectators knew that the power behind that kick was extremely formidable. Handling it with one hand must definitely be challenging. However, Luo Lang seemed to do so easily. He did not even take a single step back due to the opponent's strength, appearing cool and unruffled. Luo Lang could be seen to slowly lift his head. The red flush on his face from before was gone and his complexion had already regained its usual fairness, becoming unbelievably cool. Both his irises were a deep black, like pools of dead water, so deep and unfathomable that Chia, being pinned by them in close range, felt a chill permeate his heart. "I've told you before, to shut up," said Luo Lang calmly. "What a shame you would not listen." As he spoke, Luo Lang raised his right hand and swept it in a fierce chop down at the opponent's shank, one gripped in his other hand. Based off the speed and force that he was applying, if the strike connected, the bones of the shank would certainly break. Chia's pupils shrunk in fear, the warning bells in his mind ringing. He shook his right leg desperately, trying to regain the freedom of his leg. But Luo Lang's left hand was like a vice. He could not struggle free anytime soon. Chia naturally would not just do nothing and resign himself to his fate. He sprang up from the ground with his other foot, and executing a half flip in the air, he swung his left leg, which had initially been supporting his weight, out in a fierce kick towards the side of Luo Lang's neck. In order to protect his right shank, Chia was revealing the brutal side of his nature. He no longer held back, beginning to target Luo Lang's vital points. Everyone exclaimed in shock at the sight, sucking in a cold breath. Quite a few freshmen even stood up in horror, concerned for Luo Lang on the stage. If the opponent's kick landed, Luo Lang's fragile neck area would certainly be snapped, killing him instantly. There would be no chance at all for rescue and recovery. In an arena battle within the military academy, these vital points were off limits. Without question, Chia had broken the academy rules. Seeing this, a cold gleam flashed through Tang Yu's eyes. He was just about to take action, when he saw Luo Lang calmly change the attack trajectory of his right hand, to directly meet the other's kick. Thus, Tang Yu paused, but he still made preparations to act. However, right then, Colonel Tang Yu had drawn a huge X in his heart over Chia. This kind of person who would be so ruthless against a comrade, he would never give him a chance to go to those elite ace military troops. With an audible pow, Luo Lang's palm struck the opponent's other ankle, and Chia felt a snap. Following that, an intense pain radiated from Chia's foot to his heart, and he could not help but yell, "Arg!" The collision of the two forces naturally produced a tremendous rebound force. Chia was thrown back forcefully, and due to the intense pain he was in, he actually did not manage to land soundly. His entire body was flung out to crash heavily onto the stage, where he then slid across the ground, leaving a faint mark in his trail. Meanwhile, Luo Lang had to take several steps back before finding his footing. However, his left hand hung limply by his side. From the swinging motion it was making, it was clear to see that Luo Lang's left hand had most likely been broken by the rebound force in meeting the other's kick earlier. Looking at Chia cradling his ankle on the ground, his expression a rictus of pain, and contrasting it with Luo Lang on the other side, who also had a broken bone, but sported a cold and unfeeling expression. It was clear to see which was superior. The freshmen were naturally unconditionally on Luo Lang's side, while some of the seniors could not help but frown as well at this time. They looked down on Chia for losing the face of the seniors, and silent admiration for Luo Lang began to grow in their minds. This delicate-looking youth was actually a tough character. Colonel Tang Yu walked over to Chia's side expressionlessly and asked, "Cadet Chia, can you still fight? If you cannot, I will announce the victor for this match." Both sides were similarly injured, but it never even crossed Colonel Tang Yu's mind to ask this question of Luo Lang. This was because he believed that, as long as that fellow Luo Lang had breath left in his lungs, he would definitely continue fighting. This was how a qualified military man should behave. Compared to Luo Lang, this fifth-year Chia was just too much of a wimp. Chia felt as if there was a drill boring into his right ankle. The pain was truly unbearable. Without saying a word, Chia knew the other must have applied some hidden move on his ankle, and the hate for Luo Lang in his heart just grew even more. Right then, hearing the referee Tang Yu ask this, how could he voluntarily admit defeat? Holding back the pain, he replied, "I can fight." That said, Chia slowly climbed off the ground. This scene was greeted by the applause of the spectating students. Even though Chia had truly performed terribly before this, at this very moment, he was undoubtedly acting as a qualified cadet should. This gained him the acknowledgement of a portion of the students. At this scene, Qilong could not help but snicker softly. He said quietly to Ling Lan, "Boss, looks like that punk Luo Lang has secretly used a mean move." He stroked his jaw and wondered, which move did he use? The third form of one-inch punch. Ling Lan instantly responded, "No, it's the fourth form." "Huh? When has there been such a move?" Qilong was stupefied. How did he not know about this? The one-inch punch is the Luo family's ultimate arts. "Of course it'll have some ace in the holes," answered Ling Lan. The instructors within the learning space had already developed the one-inch punch up till the 9th form. Ling Lan's team had already mastered all the forms up to the 3rd form, but since the one-inch punch series had originated from the inherited ultimate arts of Luo Lang's family, Ling Lan had specially taught the 4th form to Luo Lang. This was to prove that the one-inch punch was still the Luo family's ultimate arts, so Luo Lang would forever have an extra ace in the hole than the others. After listening to Ling Lan's explanation, Qilong found it made sense, and so no longer concerned himself about the issue. This was Qilong's strength, always knowing where to draw the line, never demanding things that did not belong to him. On the stage, Chia, who was back on his feet, glared hatefully at Luo Lang. He knew that his performance had disgraced him in front of everyone here, and all of this had been caused by this hateful youth before him. He was raging internally, wishing that he could kill Luo Lang to release the pent-up anger and hate in his heart. Luo Lang's eyes met Chia's, and the remote disinterest in Luo Lang's gaze sent a chill through Chia. His mind, which had been consumed with rage, was suddenly shocked into wakefulness, because he had sensed a kind of danger. In fact, he could even sense a slight trace of killing intent from the other. Could it be the other also wanted to kill him? How could this be? Chia shook his head emphatically, casting this thought aside. He hadn't done anything to, so how could the other have killing intent against him? Right then, Chia had forgotten those words he had said earlier. He did not know that some things, some people, just could not be sullied. Seeing the two face off once more, Tang Yu announced, "The match continues." No sooner had he finished speaking when Luo Lang moved. He dashed out like a ferocious tiger, flying over to Chia's side. Since the other could not move properly, when should he attack if not now? Just as Luo Lang expected, 1 foot short, Chia could not dodge. He could only meet Luo Lang's attack head-on. Of course, Chia was not afraid. In fact, he was rather gleeful. He had wanted to fight Luo Lang head-on from the start. With regards to internal energy, his was undoubtedly more substantial than Luo Lang's. Fighting on that front, he had full confidence to injure Luo Lang and obtain the final victory. However, Were things really going to turn out as he expected? When the two of them exchanged the first blow, Chia's expression changed dramatically. He found that the other's attack power was no weaker than his. His original anticipated plan of using internal energy to injure the other had no way of being realized. The second move, the third move, the fourth move. Slowly, Chia realized that every time his arms blocked the other's attack, the spot he blocked with would ache in pain. This pain was extremely similar to that of where his ankle was broken, just not as intense. For the first and second move, he had not sensed much of it, but after the third and fourth moves, the pain began to intensify, and by the time they reached the seventh and eighth move, he was actually unable to raise his arms properly. A bam rang out. Luo Leng had grasped the opening and struck Chia's cheek forcefully, and Chia was sent flying. Luo Leng had held back on this strike, not using the forms of one-inch punch, but even so, Chia was knocked unconscious instantly by Luo Leng's base strength. He crashed onto the ground and did not get up again. Colonel Tang Yu quickly rushed forwards to check on Chia's condition. Seeing that the youth had no life-threatening injuries, and was indeed out for the count, he indicated for the staff in the combat hall to send Chia to the treatment center. With the present technology, as long as it was not a fatal injury, any patient who is still breathing could basically be saved. Chia was seen to be lifted off the stage, and Tang Yu then smiled and announced loudly, "The first match. First year Luo Leng of the new cadet regiment wins." The faces of the people from Lting were currently a sheet of darkness. It was unexpected that Chia, who they had had high hopes for, would actually be defeated in an upset by a frail-looking first year. The opponent had taken a match right from the start, and more frighteningly, the one they had defeated was their third strongest. Quite a few members of Lting began to reconsider, could they really win this fight against the new cadet regiment? For the first time, they began to harbor doubts. Lin Zidong gritted his teeth and said, "It's no matter. I suppose the other side had sent one of their strongest. As long as we win the rest of the matches, losing one match won't affect the final outcome." A man beside him said evenly, "The key is the fight order. If the opponent just happens to use their strongest few against our weakest." This was not like a transparent private fight, where fights were arranged according to personal strength. A blind fight not only tested a fighter's true strength, but also tested the psychological tactics and strategy of each side. Perhaps it could be called luck, but this was the mode the official challenges used, all in hopes of seeing more diverse matchups. Compared to an open fight, a blind fight was undoubtedly much fairer, if one applied the correct strategy, and had a great burst of luck, even the weak had hopes of winning. These words made Lin Zidong fall into silent contemplation. His gaze wavered slightly, but quickly settled. He did not believe that their luck would be so horrible that the opponent would manage to grab hold of those two opportunities so precisely. Luo Leng slowly walked off the stage, and he was welcomed back by the respectful gazes of the members of the new cadet regiment. As there were quite a few non-Central Academy freshmen within their ranks, those students had indeed been somewhat doubtful at Luo Leng's inclusion as one of the 5 representatives. However, this fight had proven that Luo Leng truly had the skill to be one of the 5 top fighters of the new cadet regiment. There was no longer anyone within the new cadet regiment who doubted his strength now. Seeing Luo Leng's impressive performance, the man in the box who had already become interested in Luo Leng licked his lips excitedly, chuckling deeply as he said, "What a prideful and spirited little fellow. If I break those proud bones of his bit by bit, wouldn't his expression be very interesting?" 5 ha 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 ha. 6 gruesome laughter rang out to fill the entire box, involuntarily causing one's skin to crawl. Luo Leng slowly walked to stand before Ling Lan, where he then stared coldly at her. Facing this strange situation, Wu Jiang and Li Yingji, who had initially planned to step forward and congratulate Luo Leng, stopped moving instantly. They stared uncertainly at the two people in front of them. Ling Lan remained seated, unmoved, as she stared back evenly at Luo Leng. The cold air around her body became much denser. Luo Leng opened and shut his mouth, but emitted no sound. Ling Lan coldly rebuked, still not letting go. That said, Ling Lan's eyes gleamed with a cold light, piercing Luo Lang with its intensity. As if receiving some heavy blow, Luo Lang's body swayed, and then his eyes closed and he began falling towards the ground. Qi Long reacted quickly, catching Luo Lang and pulling him into his arms. At first chance, he examined Luo Lang's arms, and then, face paling, he shouted, "Boss, there are multiple breaks on the bones of Luo Lang's arms." "I know. Let the staff arrange for Luo Lang to go to the treatment center," accompanied by Lin Zongqing. Ling Lan swiftly ordered. This punk, using the fourth form of one-inch punch multiple times when he had yet to master it, forcefully increasing the level of his internal energy. Unable to fully control the form's power, of course his own arms would have been broken by the rebound force of the one-inch punch. Still, the tolerance level of that alter ego of his was truly off the charts, and he was tough towards himself as well, actually tolerating the pain of both broken arms until he could finally defeat Chia. When Teng Yu found out that Luo Lang had been fighting while tolerating the pain of broken arms, waiting till he won and returned to his teammates' side before allowing himself to collapse, he was even more delighted with this strong and determined youth. He had already made up his mind that, even if Luo Lang's body did not meet expectations in the end, he would still use his own special rights to take in the other as his disciple. Once Luo Lang had been sent off to the treatment center, Ling Lan, noticing the confusion in Wu Jiang's and Li Yingji's eyes, spoke up to explain. Just now, the opponent had insulted Luo Lang, saying that he had only been chosen as a representative because he belongs to me. The two stared blankly back, not understanding the meaning behind the words right away. Qi Long understood, however, because Ling Lan had already mentioned it to him previously when she had explained why Luo Lang had become enraged enough to activate his innate talent. Thus, he pulled the two aside and quietly spelled things out for them. 7. Chapter 252, Fatal Weakness. Wu Jiang's and Li Yingji's facial expressions soured and they turned to spit fiercely at the ground, glaring furiously at the area where the Ting representatives were. Those words of Chia's not only insulted Luo Lang and Ling Lan, they also insulted every single person in the new cadet regiment at the same time. This made the boys livid. As classmates who had grown up alongside Ling Lan, Luo Lang, and the others of their team, Wu Jiang and Li Yingji naturally knew the nature of the close relationship among the members of Ling Lan's team. It was absolutely the purest of brotherly bonds. From the first grade at the Scout Academy, Ling Lan, who had already been more mature than any of them, had watched over and cared for his team members like an elder brother, treating them like his own younger brothers. In fact, they were very envious of the rapport between Ling Lan and the other members of his team, which was so good that, at times, they could understand each other with just one look. They just could not imagine how someone could sully the pure relationship between the two by casting such aspersions. Li Yingji had always been a straightforward person who spoke without filtering his words. He grumbled discontentedly, saying Boss Lan and Luo Lang have this kind of relationship. He might as well say it's Qi Long and Luo Lang. Those two have always hung around each other since young, sparring and fighting with one another. Haven't they spent even more time together? These words made Qi Long hook his arm around Li Yingji's neck in indignation, where he then pressed his fist forcefully against the other's head. This made Li Yingji squawk in pain, but with his fighting strength being no match for Qi Long's, he had no way of escaping Qi Long's violent hands. He could only apologize repeatedly until Qi Long finally let him go. Of course Qi Long would be annoyed. How could such a big stalwart man like him like guys one? In comparison, Qi Long still preferred those curvaceous bodies of pretty younger sisters too. Right at that moment, Little Four once more informed Ling Lan of the submission of the opponent's candidate name. This time, they had chosen their fourth strongest fighter, Song Lian Lu. Ling Lan very quickly realized the reasoning behind this arrangement of the opponent. Chia, who they had had high hopes for, had been defeated. This made Ting have no choice but to be cautious. They were afraid that if they send out the weakest among their lineup, and he met a strong opponent, they would lose one more match. However, they also did not want to send their two strongest out, as that would leave them with no one to hold the fort. Thus, After some deliberation, they had sent out the safest option, the fourth strongest, to attempt to take this match. Ling Lan turned her head to look at Qilong and the others. Just as she was about to tell Qilong to get ready, Li Yingji stepped forward and volunteered, "Boss Lan, I'll go up for this match." Ling Lan felt her gums ache as she held back the words she had been about to say. Like Luo Lang, Li Yingji was also at first-level early-stage Qixin. Against an opponent of top-level early-stage Qijin, he had almost no chance of winning, unless Li Yingji also had that kind of inexplicable, mysterious, and unpredictable innate talent like Luo Lang's. Then, there might still have been the possibility of an upset. Seeing Boss Lan staring at him with a frigid expression, Li Yingji clenched his fists nervously. Although he knew volunteering on his own to fight was rather reckless of him, very likely to affect Boss Lan's strategic arrangements, he just did not want to lose to Luo Lang. At the same time, he also wanted to prove that he was not a coward. Earlier on the stage, his involuntary shudder had caused Luo Lang to mistake him for one, and he was still stewing over it. Thus, having seen Luo Lang win the first match after great difficulty, Li Yingji did not want to fall behind Luo Lang by too much. The fighting spirit in Li Yingji's eyes made Ling Lan change her mind instantly. She nodded and said, "All right, don't disgrace our new cadet regiment." The reason why Ling Lan had changed her mind at the last moment was that Luo Lang had unexpectedly won his match. Therefore, even if Li Yingji lost this next match, it would not affect the bigger picture. After all, there was still the weakest fighter in the opponent's lineup who, barring any unexpected incidents, should lose whether Wu Jian or Qilong went up against him. And so, Ling Lan agreed to Li Yingji's plea to fight now. As long as it would not affect the final outcome, Ling Lan was willing to go along with these little fellows' wishes. Obtaining Ling Lan's approval, Li Yingji's eyes shone with a trace of pleasant surprise. He had originally thought Boss Lan did not like him very much. After all, he had indeed been rather annoying in the past. But just now, there was no dislike or apathy in Ling Lan's eyes. His demeanor had been extremely serious. In that moment, Li Yingji fully felt the trust that Ling Lan had in him. For some reason, he suddenly recalled his second eldest cousin brother Li Shi's words to him, "When you finally learn what brotherly bonds mean, then you will understand that power is not something irreplaceable." At this moment, Li Yingji seemed to vaguely understand what his second cousin brother had been saying. He looked towards Ling Lan. If it were Ling Lan, Li Yingji probably would not fight with him over the position of regiment commander. On the stage, Colonel Tang Yu had already received the name list from both sides. The moment time was up, he announced, "The new cadet regiment versus Lting Mecha clan, second round. First year Li Yingji against fourth year Song Lianlu." Inside the box, Yun Ziyu heard this announcement and his spirits rallied. He quickly turned to yell, "Shu, your younger cousin brother is up now." His opponent is Song Lianlu from our year. Li Shu, who was resting with his eyes closed on the sofa, abruptly opened his eyes. Seeing Li Yingji strut confidently onto the stage, his brow furrowed. Song Lianlu is already a Qijin master. Li Yingji is most probably no match for him. No matter how much he said he looked down on Li Yingji, Li Shu could not help but worry for him right then. Yun Ziyu had an opposing opinion. Not necessarily. That weak-looking youth earlier managed to defeat the Qijin stage Qia after all. I think this year of freshmen aren't as weak as we think them to be. Perhaps your cousin is also already in Qixin. Li Shu was silent for a moment, and then said faintly, "I hope it turns out that way. Still, if he loses, I will let him understand the consequences of losing." Since he and his eldest cousin brother could not become the family head of the Li family, he hoped that Li Yingji, who would become the family head in the end, would be even stronger. Even if he could not get used to the Li family's heartlessness, having been taught all this time to take pride in the Li family, Li Shu still did not want to see the Li family decline. Seeing that both sides were ready to fight, Colonel Tang Yu waved his right hand and shouted, "Begin." Following this sound, the two fighters faced each other from a distance, not attacking right off the bat. Chia's loss had made Song Lianlu become exceedingly cautious. He did not know whether his opponent was strong or weak, so he was prepared to observe the situation for a bit before making a decision. Meanwhile, Li Yingji had received instruction from Ling Lan as well before getting onto the stage. Like with Luo Lang, because he had just entered Jijin stage and his Qi Jin had yet to settle, it was not wise for him to fight head-on with his opponent. Thus, his strategy would still focus on drawing things out. Of course, the situation on the stage would be constantly shifting, so everything would still depend on Li Yingji's judgment. Although Li Yingji was an arrogant punk, he was not an impulsive one. His combat intelligence was still pretty good, otherwise he would not have remained securely within the top 5 for 10 years. Therefore, he chose the same path as Song Lianlu. The two of them faced each other from a distance, circling the stage as they looked for a chance to attack. This was distinctly different from Luo Lang and Chia's direct confrontation. The two fighters in this fight circled the stage for a whole 3 minutes without acting. This dull scenario made the spectating students lose their patience, some of them even outright beginning to yawn. Quite a few people began discussing among themselves, wondering how many minutes more they would spend dancing around each other. Right then, the initially still circling Song Lianlu suddenly rocked on the balls of his feet, and then his entire body shot forward like an arrow. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Li Yingji, his right fist striking out fiercely at Li Yingji's left side. Just before, a weakness had suddenly appeared in Li Yingji's defense. Song Lianlu knew that this could also be a lure, but he also knew that if he did not try and attack now, even if they continued to weave around one another for half a day, he still might not find a better chance to attack. Thus, Song Lianlu decided to make his move. However, as Song Lianlu attacked, he found that the weakness had disappeared. In its place was Li Yingji's long ready-clawed hands. This was the Li family's ultimate arts, the strongest offensive-defensive measure to handle an opponent's attacks. Seeing this, Ling Lan's brow furrowed, knowing that Li Yingji was likely to come to grief. This lure and counterattack tactic of Li Yingji's was actually not wrong. His mistake was in underestimating his opponent's capabilities. If he had used this move against an opponent of equal level, Li Yingji would absolutely have had the upper hand, but now, things were not so certain. Sure enough, Li Yingji's grasping hands locked onto the opponent's right fist, but the moment they connected, Li Yingji felt a strong surge of energy coming from the opponent's fist, almost repelling his grab off in its intensity. Li Yingji knew that if the other repelled his grab, he would certainly take a heavy blow from the other in return. He would definitely be injured, and may have to declare his loss in advance. He did not want Luo Lang to taunt him, so, gritting his teeth, he tolerated the intense pain radiating up his arm, tenaciously keeping his hold on the other's right fist. Song Lianlu felt that he was about to shake his opponent's palm off, but just as he was about to succeed, the other retained the hold on his right fist and then he felt a pull. He felt the strength of his entire body being pulled to an empty spot, and he careened uncontrollably to crash into the shielded area on the edges of the arena. The shielded area emitted a blinding light, a pattern like the shattering of glass appearing within the light. In the meantime, after drawing the opponent's strength to one side, Li Yingji's ready-dried fist struck out immediately towards Song Lianlu's chest. Defense was just a prelude to attacking. The final objective of Li Yingji's move was here. However, Song Lianlu reacted equally swiftly. His left palm moved to block his chest at the critical moment, forcibly receiving this unexpected attack by Li Yingji. With a pow, fist met palm, and then, with a loud crack, the two were sent flying backwards. Song Lianlu had to take a whole 3 steps back after landing to find his footing, while Li Yingji also had to take 3 steps back before standing firmly. From the spectating students' perspective, the two fighters had battled to a draw. Only those with a keen eye had noticed that Li Yingji's low-hanging left hand was trembling minutely beyond his control. That powerful attack of the opponent he had grabbed hold of previously had clearly damaged Li Yingji's left hand severely. Wu Jiang and Qi Long could tell, and their expressions paled. Wu Jiang said worriedly, Li Yingji's left hand is injured. It'll be tough from this point on, Ling Lan said calmly. This match, Li Yingji was at a disadvantage from the start. That's why winning or losing isn't so important. I just wanted to see how far he could go. Li Yingji had a fatal weakness. When he knew he was at a disadvantage, that he was no match for his opponent, he would very easily give up on himself. His character lacked some tenacity. This was also why he had lost to Luo Lang so many times all this while, ending up in 5th place, slightly behind Luo Lang in the rankings. This was what Ling Lan was thinking. Since Li Yingji had sincerely acknowledged her as boss, she was inclined to help Li Yingji solve this problem. Today was a good opportunity. It was rare for Li Yingji to have such an intense desire to fight. Chapter 253, Stand Up. Suppressing the intense pain coming from his left hand, Li Yingji looked at the confident Song Lianglu across from him, and his heart sank. That last move had let him know just how wide the gap was between his strength and the opponent's. Under these circumstances, how could he beat the other? Li Yingji's gaze began to waver with uncertainty. Song Lianglu had similarly sensed the power behind Li Yingji's attack. Despite his hastiness in blocking it, he had still managed to take it. It looked like the strength of this cocky punk in front of him was indeed weaker than him by a strand. With this, he had some basis for confidence now. His initial caution and tentative approach vanished, to be replaced by a raging barrage of attacks. Facing this sudden attack, Li Yingji naturally did not choose to take it forcefully. He instantly retreated to evade. It should be said that though Li Yingji's evasion ability was not as elegant as Luo Lang's, it was still extremely remarkable, nimbly dodging all of Song Lianglu's fierce attacks. Still, even so, Li Yingji was already disadvantaged, clearly being a passive receptor of Song Lianglu's attacks. Just like that, one attacked fiercely without any reservations, while the other dodged narrowly again and again. Everyone could tell that the loss of the new cadet regiment's representative was just a matter of time, unless this freshman managed to pull out some ultimate move and have a sudden explosion of strength like the previous freshman. The outcome of this match would not change. Of course, they would not jump to a conclusion so quickly. After all, before the final results were out, anything was possible. Thus, everyone watched the stage intently, waiting for the results to emerge. Either this freshman would be on the defensive right until he gets defeated, or, like in the previous round, he would suddenly explode and launch a counterattack from dire straits. Below the stage, the spectating Wu Jiang and Qilong's faces were growing darker and darker. They knew that, if things continued like this, Li Yingji would definitely lose. It was not that they could not accept failure, but they did not want to see Li Yingji being pummeled continuously in such a frustrating manner. In their minds, even if they lost, they must lose gloriously. Ling Lan frowned. Li Yingji's old problem had appeared again. The moment he met an opponent he could not beat, he would become unmotivated and defend passively, having no courage at all to risk everything in a last-ditch struggle. Ling Lan began to think back. When had Li Yingji begun to have this issue? As Ling Lan had not paid much attention to Li Yingji in the past, by the time she had noticed, this fellow had already had this problem. Of course, Ling Lan was not a saintly matron. She would not go and help this irritating punk the way he was back then even when she noticed. Therefore, this problem had lasted all this while until today. Sensing his boss's confusion, Little Four could not help but roll his eyes. Without saying a word, he pulled out several video clips he had recorded in the early days, projecting them within Ling Lan's mind space. The first video was of Ling Lan's first fight against Li Yingji. Without even sparing the other a glance, Ling Lan had sent Li Yingji flying with one punch. At the end of the video, Li Yingji's disgruntled and resentful gaze was clearly captured within the frame. The second video was Ling Lan's second fight against Li Yingji. Again, she had not even looked at him, sending him flying with one kick. Li Yingji's expression at this time was one of dejection, with even a touch of self-doubt. The third video was similarly a fight between Ling Lan and Li Yingji. Ling Lan once again casually sent Li Yingji flying with one punch. Li Yingji's expression here now was somewhat wooden, and a light trace of self-contempt could be read from his lips. The fourth video was still a fight between Ling Lan and Li Yingji. This time, Ling Lan just happened to be in the period when her killing intent had been the densest. Regardless of how Little Four tried to cover it up, some had still leaked when she had fought, instantly smashing through Li Yingji's mental defenses. That time, Li Yingji did not even manage to do anything before being sent flying off the stage by a punch from Ling Lan. Back then, his gaze was filled with terror. From then onwards, whenever Li Yingji encountered someone stronger than him, he no longer had the courage to try and fight it out. Ling Lan rubbed her forehead wearily. Little Four, you mean that Li Yingji's current condition is completely because of me? Little Four nodded firmly. Of course, the first few defeats had already made that fellow's heart become unbelievably weak. That fourth time was coincidentally when your killing intent was at its worst. His spirit received a terrible blow by that killing intent you leaked, leaving him with an inner demon. TSK, why is this fellow's heart so damn weak? Isn't he very arrogant and proud? Ling Lan was somewhat baffled by this. Qilong had been constantly losing to her as well, and she did not see any openings open up in that brat's mental state to produce an inner demon. He still fought as roughly as before. How could it be the same? Qilong respects you, boss. In his heart, boss is not only boss, but also a master. Losing to you is very normal for him, but it's different for Li Yingji. He has always considered you, boss, as a rival, desiring to beat you so much that he was almost crazed by it. But boss just happened to be too strong and overwhelming, losing again and again, losing until he had no more confidence, and then his already fragile heart was coincidentally invaded by boss's killing intent, hence leading to this problem. Little Four's explanation made Ling Lan somewhat depressed. She had never thought that Li Yingji would end up following her in the end, making this problem an issue she had to handle. If she had only known earlier, she would have been more merciful back then. However, it was too late for all that now. She might as well put her energy into thinking about how she could resolve the psychological problem this brat had now. Right then, a powerful sound of fist meeting flesh rang out. Pow! On the stage, Song Lianlu had finally grasped a chance to land a heavy punch onto Li Yingji's left shoulder. Li Yingji was sent flying to crash heavily onto the stage. He slid several meters, leaving an extremely obvious line on the stage. It was clear to see how powerful the opponent's blow had been. Li Yingji could not stop himself from throwing up a mouthful of blood. Although his vital points had not been hit directly, the opponent's strength had still been strong enough to cause blast injury to his internal organs. He felt a profound ache in his chest cavity, and even worse, his entire left arm had lost all sensation. Who knew if that last punch had shattered the bones of his shoulder, or if it had damaged his nervous system? Song Lianlu saw the opponent struck down and pleasant surprise flashed through his eyes. Just as he wanted to follow through to determine the outcome, Colonel Tang Yu suddenly stopped him and indicated for him to stand to one side. Then, Colonel Tang Yu walked up to Li Yingji's side and asked, "Do you choose to admit defeat or continue to fight?" When Li Yingji heard Colonel Tang Yu's question, a voice rang out in his heart. "Li Yingji, admit defeat quickly. The opponent's strength is so much higher than yours, you have no way of beating him. There's no point in persisting. You might as well admit defeat and suffer less." Yes, why did he have to hold on so hard and fight? He was weaker than the opponent to begin with. Wasn't it normal to lose? Li Yingji slowly raised his hand, prepared to say the words "I admit defeat," when a cold voice rang out from behind him. "Li Yingji, stand up." Li Yingji turned his head in bewilderment and saw Ling Lan, who had initially been seated below the stage, now standing right by the edge of the arena stage, looking at him with an icy expression. "Li Yingji, where have the guts you had when you were younger gone to?" "Godmit, stand up. It's time to let them see what the real cocky Li Yingji is like." Ling Lan's gaze was clearly frigid, but for some reason Li Yingji could see the same firm faith in him as before in his gaze. "He understands me. and is also willing to believe in me, which was why he had agreed to my request. Li Yingji did not forget that, before the round, Ling Lan's gaze had been on Qilong, but he had still agreed to his volunteering in the end, not perfunctorily, but with full faith in him, believing that he would put up a good fight. No, I cannot let him look down on me. Li Yingji was shaken, a voice in his heart was raging. Yes, I'm cocky and arrogant. I was not afraid of anything at the beginning. Even if someone was stronger than me, I would dare to challenge them. Admit defeat? When had this phrase appeared in my mouth? That's definitely not me. Li Yingji abruptly turned his head around. His initially slightly raised right hand changed directions to slam onto the ground and support him as he slowly pushed himself off the ground. In spite of the agony, there was no change in Li Yingji's face at this moment, as if the wounds on his body did not exist. Seeing Li Yingji's movements, Ling Lan turned around with satisfaction. Returning to her seat, she believed that, this time, Li Yingji was different now. Li Yingji stood up straight, and turning to the waiting Colonel Tang Yu, he said, I want to continue fighting. A trace of approval flashed through Colonel Tang Yu's eyes, and he nodded and said, all right, the match continues. Song Lai and Lu silently tsket. If Colonel Tang Yu had not stopped him, he could have taken the chance to beat the other until he had no more fight in him. At the heart of it, this punk had been saved by the referee. However, this would be the only time. A subtle smile appeared on the corners of Song Lai and Lu's lips. This half-crippled punk before him was completely no match for him, who was the one who yelled earlier. In the tilting area below the stage, Lin Zidong frowned as he looked at Ling Lan walking back to her seat, and asked the people around him, I don't know. This person is very unfamiliar. The person beside him looked closely at Ling Lan, and found her face unfamiliar, and so shook his head. As Ling Lan had always stayed within the villa without going out, other than those people from the Doha academies, most of the major factions outside really did not know about her. This person needs to be watched. Lin Zidong was extremely alert, being able to rekindle the comrades' fighting spirit with just a few words. This person could not be simple. Yes, Vice Regiment Commander Lin, I will arrange it, answered the person beside him respectfully, silently memorizing Ling Lan's name. Qilong, Li Yingji's aura seems to have changed, said Wu Jian to Qilong excitedly. Li Yingji's transformation on the stage had also been sensed by Wu Jian. Qilong let out a sigh of relief as well and replied, yes, we don't have to worry about him anymore. He then sighed and added, Boss Lan is truly Boss Lan, able to change Li Yingji with just one sentence. These words received Wu Jian's agreement. He glanced admiringly at the calm and cold-faced Ling Lan by their sides. Only a talent such as Ling Lan, who could discern a person's nature with one look, would be able to unearth the latent talents of everyone in their team, better leading them as they advanced further. On this point, Wu Jian was really too far away from Ling Lan's level. Once again, Wu Jian felt the distance between he and Ling Lan keenly. This sort of respect and admiration accumulated bit by bit in Wu Jian's heart, until it was so substantial that it could not be overturned. He could only continue to willingly chase after the other, until the end of time. Chapter 254, I'm proud of you. The sudden shift in Li Yingji's aura startled Song Lai and Lu. His attacking speed slowed reflexively, giving Li Yingji time to swiftly pull away to face Song Lai and Lu from a distance once more. Seeing this, a slight smile appeared on Colonel Tang Yu's face. This representative of the new cadet regiment was still not too bad. Although he did not perform well at the start, he had still adapted in the end. Only a child like this was worthy of being a Wolang's teammate. Colonel Tang Yu's heart had unknowingly begun to lean towards the new cadet regiment. Li Yingji glared at Song Lai and Lu. At this moment, he only wanted to rip off a chunk of flesh from the opponent's body somehow, exactly like a savage wolf cub, prepared for its final struggle. Li Yingji's fierce gaze made Song Lai and Lu's heart clench. His expression became grim. Even if he was confident in his victory, he did not dare to move recklessly right then. Seeing the opponent suddenly become hesitant and cautious, Li Yingji's lips curled into a self-mocking smirk. It turned out that when he himself was resolute, the opponent's aura would also shift in response. Many of his previous inexplicable defeats had truly been his own fault. Li Yingji's self-mocking smile lasted only for a brief moment before he once again reverted to his typical arrogant and haughty demeanor. The appearance of this expression actually made his initially handsome face rather irritating to look at. Apparently changes in mental state would affect one's external appearance. This was also why Li Yingji had not been very popular in the Central Scout Academy despite being a handsome little fellow. Still, the attention of the spectating students was not on Li Yingji's annoying face. Instead, their gazes were drawn to an extremely unique motion he made. Li Yingji's remaining mobile right hand was raised slightly forwards, his fingers molded into a strange form. Like a hook but not a hook, like a fist but not a fist. But for some reason, the moment this form appeared, everyone found their attention involuntarily drawn to it. Ah, what move is this? Seeing this atypical stance, inside the box, Yun Xiu could not help but turn to ask his good friend Li Shu in surprise. This brat is actually using this move now. Li Shu's expression instantly gentled. Earlier, when Li Yingji was being beaten like a stray dog, his face had been thunderous and unsightly. You know, Yun Xiu stared with starry eyes at Li Shu, his face filled with anticipation to hear his best friend's explanation. This cute mo puppy dog look made a small smile appear on Li Shu's lips, his mood turning for the better instantly. He said, "This is my family's exclusive killing art. Choosing to use it here, it looks like this fellow is prepared for a final plunge." At this explanation, Yun Xiu turned to look wide-eyed at the screen, excited to see what would happen next. Seeing the opponent's strange actions, without even thinking about it, Song Lianlu knew the other was about to do something major. However, he was not like that moron Chia, only wanting to save face and reacting with brute force. As long as the final victory was his, he did not mind if the process was unsightly, or if it was dull and uninteresting. Thus, Song Lianlu was extremely patient. He chose to continue waiting for this surging aura of Li Yingji's to pass. He believed that, having been heavily injured, Li Yingji would not be able to hold out for too long. This rallied strength of his would certainly pass, and that moment would be Song Lianlu's time to attack. The scene once more descended into the ennui of the start. On the stage, the two fighters each staked out a separate corner, where they stood unmoving. Time passed bit by bit, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. The two fighters who seemed content to face off like this forever made the spectating students restless and they began to chat among themselves. The initially quiet and austere combat hall began to rustle with the noise of discussion. How long are they planning to face off like that? This is too boring. Isn't that freshman already half crippled? Why does that lilting person have to be so careful? Is it necessary? All these were complaints by the bored people. That new cadet's stance is a little cryptic. It's necessary for the lilting candidate to be cautious. Looks like lilting's representative can't figure out the depth of the other's move either. But waiting is more advantageous for the lilting candidate, even though the fight is more boring this way. This is undeniably the correct way. These were the viewpoints of those who supported the prolonged impasse. The views of the people below the stage were varied. Some scorned lilting, some supported them, but no one believed that the new cadet regiment had any chance of making a comeback in this match. This was because Li Yingji was already heavily injured, while Song Lianlu of lilting was completely unharmed. Furthermore, Song Lianlu was obviously the stronger of the two fighters, so unless there was a major accident, the outcome would not change anymore. Right now, all the audience was waiting for was when Song Lianlu would officially defeat Li Yingji and clinch the victory. Just when everyone thought that this impasse would continue, Li Yingji seemed to have run out of stamina and could not hold on any longer. His body swayed slightly. Song Lianlu's gaze brightened, and long prepared, he dashed in, leaping at Li Yingji. At the moment Li Yingji had swayed, that immense pressure from that move pressing down on Song Lianlu had collapsed, the threatening sense of danger hanging over his head disappearing completely. Song Lianlu believed that Li Yingji's broken body could not support the move any longer, so this was definitely the best opportunity for him to attack. Just when Song Lianlu was about to hit the other's body, he saw the pale-faced Li Yingji suddenly smile at him. This unexpected smile made Song Lianlu's heart clench, but victory was right in front of him. His fist would strike the opponent in the very next second. Based on his strength, he believed that Li Yingji was no longer able to muster the energy to fight on. Watching from below the stage, when Ling Lan saw this scene, her expression changed abruptly and she stood up quickly. The corners of her lips twitched, but in the end, she only pressed her lips tight in a thin line, expression cold as she waited for the final outcome. Unwilling to give up on this opportunity, despite the unease in his heart, Song Lianlu clenched his teeth and punched his fist forwards tenaciously. He could not simply give up on this chance just because he could not figure out Li Yingji's strange smile. Instantly, he felt his fist strike a soft fleshy body. Bullseye. Song Lianlu was overjoyed. This meant he had won this match. But before he could even smile in relief and joy, he felt his abdomen hit by a large force. It instantly broke through his defensive layer of internal energy, penetrating into his body. PFFFT, a mouthful of blood sprayed out from Song Lianlu's mouth. The powerful force had directly injured his internal organs. His entire body was sent stumbling back 7 to 8 steps before he managed to stop. However, right after that, he felt his knees fold and he slumped to sit on the ground. The cause of this phenomenon was the strange and erratic internal energy running amok in his body. It was brutalizing his innards, nerves, and muscles, leaving Song Lianlu with no more strength to remain standing. Meanwhile, on the other side, Li Yingji had similarly been sent stumbling back several steps by Song Lianlu's attack. He retreated even further than Song Lianlu, only stopping when he reached the edges of the stage. Compared to Song Lianlu's injuries, Li Yingji was undoubtedly hurt even worse. Mouthfuls of blood were being heaved out uncontrollably from his mouth, but even so, he still smiled as he stared at Song Lianlu, smugly and arrogantly. This brat, actually choosing a mutually destructive outcome. In the second floor box, Lisha smacked a palm into the wall in a fit of anger, leaving a palm print in it. At one side, Yun Ziyu's heart ached once more. It looked like the fewer than few credits he had could not be saved anymore. Still, heartache aside, he was even more worried about the condition of Li Yingji. "Shu, will your cousin be fine after taking that blow?" "As long as he still breathes, he won't die," said Lisha flatly. Lisha may have sounded indifferent, but he was still worried for that disappointing cousin of his deep inside. After all, that brat had clearly been injured severely and was likely unable to move anymore. It was very probable that he would faint dead away on the stage in the very next second. Li Yingji had not chosen to dodge that heavy blow by Song Lianlu, using his body to take it forcefully instead. This was full-on direct internal damage. Of course, Lisha also knew well that it was not that Li Yingji could not dodge that swaying motion from before. Lisha knew that it had been a lure because the Li family had that particular combination move. However, he had not thought that Li Yingji would use the method of exchanging injury for injury to counterattack. Although Lisha felt that this was somewhat not worth it, he had to admit that for Li Yingji to inflict heavy damage on his opponent, this was the only option which had any chance of succeeding. It should be known that if Li Yingji had chosen to dodge, the opponent would also have had a similar chance of evading Li Yingji's killer move. This brat has become much more ruthless than before, not only towards others, but also towards himself. Being able to take such ruthless action, this brat has grown up a little more. It is just unclear whether this growth is good or bad, thought Lisha somewhat dispiritedly. On the stage, Li Yingji knew he was smiling because he had gravely injured the opponent. The after effects of the Li family killing move would be more than enough to trouble the other considerably. He had avenged himself, even if he did not win the match. He did not feel disheartened. He believed that his companions would definitely recover this loss. Li Yingji was in fact already at his limit. He felt his head spinning and his vision blur. These were the symptoms of massive blood loss. He knew he should lie down and receive first aid, but for some reason, he did not want to just lie down like this. He wanted to see Boss Lan's face and observe his expression, but he just did not have the strength left to even turn his head around. What a pity, not being able to see Boss Lan's expression at this time. I wonder if he would be satisfied with my performance today? Li Yingji thought somewhat bitterly. So he had yearned so much for Boss Lan's acknowledgement. Li Yingji, today, I'm proud of you. The distinctly cold voice belonging to Ling Lan rang out by Li Yingji's ears. This voice made Li Yingji's spirits perk up. He actually managed to turn his head and saw that icy yet domineering face of Boss Lan. Currently, Ling Lan had once again walked over to stand by the edge of the stage. Even though his face was as cold and flat as usual, Li Yingji could clearly feel the sincerity of his words. That will do. Li Yingji closed his eyes in satisfaction, a smile on his lips as he toppled backwards. However, someone very quickly caught him. It was the referee of the fights, Colonel Tang Yu. The moment Colonel Tang Yu saw Li Yingji's condition, he knew the other was already completely unconscious, unable to continue fighting. His condition was dangerous as well. Even without using internal energy to probe the other's body, he could tell the other had received extensive internal damage, because blood was still flowing unstoppably from Li Yingji's mouth even now. Chapter 255, Qilong enters the stage. Staff, send him to the treatment center immediately. Tang Yu shouted. 2 uniformed staff members brought a stretcher onto the stage, quickly whisking Li Yingji away to the treatment center. Seeing this, Ling Lan turned to instruct Qilong, notify Ziyi quickly. Tell him to go with him and keep us updated. Qilong quickly contacted Ziyi, telling him to follow Li Yingji to the treatment center, and to give them timely reports on Li Yingji's condition. This combat method of Li Yingji's, which fully displayed his unwillingness to lose even if it would result in an internecine outcome, one had moved Qilong, Wu Jian, and the others. It had also let the members of the new cadet regiment see a whole new side of the arrogant to the point of annoying Li Yingji. It turned out that detestable second-generation ancestor, who would every so often push them around with his abilities and family background, was as willing as them to put his all into fighting for his companions' freedom and their futures. At this time, even those new cadet regiment members who bore some dislike for Li Yingji found themselves silently laying down their grudges. Since you treat me with sincerity, then I will also treat you sincerely. We are comrades willing to brave life and death together, advancing hand in hand without ever giving up. Li Yingji was very quickly carted away, leaving a still relatively conscious Song Lianlu on the field. Tang Yu announced expressionlessly, the second match. 4th year Song Lianlu of the Lting Mecha clan wins. Overall, the score is now at 1-1. Tang Yu had just announced the results when Song Lianlu on the other side could not hold on any longer either, collapsing to the ground in a dead faint. Tang Yu could only send someone to cart Song Lianlu to the treatment center as well. It had only been 2 matches, but all 4 fighters involved had to be admitted into the treatment center. It was clear to see how intense the fights were this time. A cold gleam flashed through Ling Lan's eyes, and the surrounding temperature dropped by several degrees. Qilong and Wu Jian could not help but shiver. Without having to ask, they knew that Boss Lan was currently very angry, otherwise the temperature would not drop so significantly. Still, they were very happy to see Boss Lan react this way. This meant that Boss Lan was about to go berserk, and the fate of the Lting contingent could only be even worse than Luo Leng and Li Yingji's. Qilong and Wu Jian's anticipatory schadenfreude was, at the heart of it, because Lting had been too brutal. Their fighters had no intention of stopping the moment victory was determined to. Otherwise, Luo Leng and Li Yingji would not have been injured so badly, and Ling Lan would not have become so angry. Following Tang Yu's announcement, the waiting Lin Zidong finally let out a sigh of relief. They had finally won this match. He had not expected the opponent to be this strong, able to fight so fiercely against Lting's representative. Lin Zidong was somewhat regretful. Perhaps he should have found out more about the opponents before making arrangements. However, he only wavered for an instant, and then Lin Zidong's eyes became steady again. With the overall score at 1-1, the 2 sides were again at the starting line. Of the subsequent 3 matches, he only needed to win 2, and Lting would win this wagered fight. Compared to the other side who had already played all their trump cards, He still had two of the strongest Joker's three in his hand. This fight, it was impossible for him to lose. Lin Zidong looked towards the two seniors seated beside him watching the fights, and a trace of respect shone in his eyes. With a bowed posture, he softly asked one of them, "Senior Feng Ming, the next match, I may have to trouble you to fight, to clinch another victory for Lting." These two powerhouses were not people he could order around casually. He needed to ask whether they were willing. One of them, the man Lin Zidong had called Senior Feng Ming, laughed brightly at the question. "Seeing them fight so well, my hands have indeed begun to itch. The next round, I'll fight." His smile as wide as ever, he turned his head to look in the direction of the new cadet regiment area. His gaze was tinged with admiration and approval. It looked like he had a very good impression of the new cadet regiment. In the end, he did not forget to advise, "Zidong, if Lting really wins, inform Qiaoting that we cannot bully them. We need to cultivate them well. They will definitely become the future supporting pillars of our Lting." Freshly admitted into the military academy, and they were already able to fight on equal terms with older cadets like themselves, he believed that the futures of these youths would perhaps be even better than theirs. Lin Zidong smiled and nodded. "That goes without saying, otherwise, I would not have arranged this wagered fight." The connotation was that he had set his sights on the other side, which was why he wanted to take them in wholesale. Senior Feng Ming nodded and said nothing more. Meanwhile, the other strong and good-looking youth beside him said levelly, "The freshmen this year are indeed very strong." "Boss Huo." Senior Feng Ming turned in bewilderment to stare at his team leader, unsure why the other would say this. "Two Qijin stage masters have already come out. What level is the remaining three at?" the good-looking youth said with a half-smile and a quirked brow. Senior Feng Ming began to muse in silence at those words, while Lin Zidong had also been startled into realization. "Slack-jawed?" he asked. "Boss Huo, you mean?" "No, they can't all be at Qijin stage." Lin Zidong shook his head repeatedly in denial. "That's definitely impossible. How could there be so many Qijin stage masters among the freshmen? 2 or 3 would already be stretching the limits. They must be using the principle of Danji's horse racing. The next one must definitely be their strongest fighter." Hearing this, the good-looking youth only swept a dispassionate gaze at the somewhat panicking Lin Zidong, mentally shaking his head. Although Lin Zidong performed pretty well on all fronts, he was still not from the military strategy specialization after all, unable to truly hold steady during times of crisis. However, this was already Qiaoting's problem. Since he had already let go, he needed to believe that Qiaoting could support the whole of Lting. On the other side, Lin Zidong had just submitted the name list when Little Four alerted Ling Lan, saying, "Boss, the other side has sent out Ni Feng Ming, the second strongest, is it?" Currently, Ling Lan could only send out either Qilong or Wu Jiang. Comparatively, the public regiment commander Wu Jiang could less afford to lose. Ling Lan's gaze landed decisively on Qilong. Although Qilong's physical skills level was higher than Wu Jiang's by 2 levels, he was still no match for the opponent. Still, Ling Lan believed that Qilong would be able to learn much from this fight. "Qilong, prepare to fight," Ling Lan ordered. At her words, Wu Jiang's spirits sank as Qilong shouted excitedly, "Got it, boss." Both of them had had their fighting spirits stoked by the previous 2 matches and wanted to be the third to fight. Unfortunately, Ling Lan had chosen Qilong in the end. Thus, one dejected, one gleeful, 2 distinctly different expressions appeared just like that before Ling Lan. Facing the endlessly mournful and piteous signals Wu Jiang was emitting, Ling Lan rubbed her brow and said helplessly, "Wu Jiang, you'll get your turn. Don't rush." Ling Lan's words made Wu Jiang's eyes light up, and he instantly tucked away his previously mournful expression as he threw a smug look in Qilong's direction. "You can bloody enjoy yourself in this match first. Next round is my turn." Right then, Wu Jiang did not know that Qilong was actually a pitiful cannon fodder Ling Lan had sent off to die. Obtaining the final victory would depend on him and Ling Lan. Tang Yu received the name lists sent by both sides, and the moment time was up, he announced, "Lting Mecha Clan vs New Cadet Regiment, 3rd round, Fifth-year Ni Fengming against first-year Qi Long. This announcement caused a commotion to break out below the stage. In particular, those older cadets sported faces full of shock. They had never expected that, for this match, Lting would actually dig out their previous vice-regiment commander. Since he had appeared, then would the previous Lting regiment commander appear as well? That person was the number one within the military academy for physical combat. After both representatives had stepped onto the stage, having obtained confirmation from both sides that they were ready, Colonel Tang Yu coolly declared, "Match start." Following this cry, Ni Fengming made the same decision as Song Lianlu earlier. He wanted to observe the opponent's strength before making a decision, so he did not launch an attack. Instead, he immediately moved into a defensive position, his eyes closely watching the opponent's stance and movements. Ni Fengming thought that his opponent would do the same, but Qi Long surprised him. After jumping back and forth several times to stretch and loosen his muscles, Qi Long suddenly accelerated and charged forwards, coming up to Ni Fengming in the blink of an eye, lifting a hand to send a fist hurtling straight at the other's face. Qi Long's fighting style was not like the typical balanced, simultaneously offensive and defensive combat of the Chinese Federation. His style was closer to that of the neighboring Caesar Empire, full-force attacks, substituting offense as defense. It could almost be said that defense did not exist for Qi Long. Although Ling Lan had always wanted Qi Long to learn some defense, after multiple sessions of intense torment, Qi Long had walked onto a different path of training. Since he could not defend well, then he might as well not defend at all and focus all of his strength into increasing his body's resistance and ability to take hits. Within Ling Lan's learning space, this type of training method was named body refining. It was one of the hardest paths to walk, but once it came to fruition, according to Ling Lan, he would have an indestructible body, able to withstand up to 100,000 caddies 5 of force. Thus, Ni Fengming was destined to have no chance of observing his opponent. A wild barrage of attacks had begun bearing down on him. Ni Fengming weaved left and right, finally dodging this sudden wild attack of Qi Long's. He was almost drenched in cold sweat by fear. It was fortunate that he had plenty of battle experience. If someone weaker were in his place, they would certainly have been pummeled silly, falling in bafflement beneath these flurry of wild punches before they could even show what they could do. Ni Fengming gradually got used to this unreasonable and brutish method of attacking. He began to inject some counterattacks in between his initial dodging. The two fighters went back and forth exchanging blows, throwing punches and kicks. The fighting was intense. It was difficult to determine who would win anytime soon. Watching this, Tang Yu's eyebrows quirked and a slight smile emerged on his face. At the beginning, Qi Long's disorganized attack made him think that this youth was the weakest representative of the new cadet regiment, perhaps only included to make up the numbers. But now from the looks of it, he had misjudged. His seemingly reckless actions were actually very systematic. Every attack was directed at a tricky spot which would harass the opponent. Even more astounding was the fact that the trajectory of his every attack also shielded all the fatal weaknesses and openings of his own body very well. If the opponent wanted to strike those spots, he would have to choose to battle it out with Qi Long with brute force, otherwise his efforts would be futile. Colonel Tang Yu was filled with silent admiration. Who'd have thought that there would be so many highly talented youths among this year's freshmen? This youth especially had progressed even further than his previous two teammates in the realm of physical skills. It could even be said that, while others were still at the stage of learning through mimicry, he had already begun to seek out and develop a combat style exclusive to himself. Tang Yu's gaze was involuntarily drawn to peer at the area below the stage. There were still two more youths. Would they be just as outstanding?